If you like our channel, please subscribe and make sure to click on the bell icon, so that you won't miss any future audiobooks we'll upload for free each week on YouTube.
The Betrayed Lady Winters by Emily Linfield. Chapter 1. The pale green dress cinched in a little too tightly around Lady Ivy Winter's waist. As she made her way down the stairs, to greet all the high society guests that had come to her home to see the woman that she had become. The style that the handmaidens had spent most of the afternoon crafting in her hair, pulled and tugged every single time she turned her head, and the makeup felt heavy on her face, making it very hard to smile. It was safe to say that she did not feel too happy about the way that she looked, or the party that her father was throwing on her behalf. She had not ever felt so uncomfortable in her life. Lady Ivy Winters always knew that this day was coming. It was one of those things that were inevitable. Being a lady from a family with a well-respected name, she was always going to be expected to marry someone from a family with equal wealth and reputation, but at just turning 20 years of age, she felt much too young. She could not consider being a wife or a mother, nor could she imagine all the responsibilities that came with that. She was not. Her father had allowed her to put this off for much longer than other girls. Ivy's two best friends, Elizabeth and Mary, had both been married for almost a year, but that did not make her feel any better. Elizabeth already thought that she might be with child, which was a terrifying prospect all on its own, and Mary was desperately unhappy with her much older husband, who she certainly did not love, nor really even like very much. Her story was enough to put Ivy off the idea for life. She did not want to be so sad. "Ah, Lady Ivy," her father called out in his usual jolly tone. "There are some people you must meet." He took her arm and guided his daughter around the room, introducing her to the most important people he felt were there. Lord Winters was extremely proud of his daughter. He felt like she was a testament to him, especially since her mother had died in childbirth with their youngest child, Ivy's brother, Ewan. He had raised both of his children alone, with only the assistance of the nannies and the house staff, while running a successful accounting business at the same time, and he was proud of how she had turned out. He was also well aware of her beauty, and he knew that the Winters name would mean a lot. So Lord Winters needed to ensure that the man she chose to marry was the right one. He thought that he had found him, too. A gentleman with the right title, a wonderful ambition, and a good fortune behind him. He would be able to take care of his little girl very successfully, giving her the life that she deserved. He had a grand home, a good business, and a staff of his own. He was perfect. "This is Duke Royce Merrick," he said with great pride. "A gentleman who is very keen to meet you." Lord Winters stepped backward to give the pair some space, and gave them both an expectant look. He had been thinking about this for a very long time, and this was the best match he could think of. There was a lot riding on this, and he desperately wanted it to work. He wanted them to get along well. He did not want his daughter to end up married to someone that she did not like. But he needed her to be looked after, too. "Oh, I am pleased to meet you." Ivy bobbed into a curtsy before she extended her hand for him to take, which Royce took and kissed gently, like any gentleman was supposed to do. "It is also wonderful to meet you," he said in a smooth-sounding voice. "You look lovely tonight." Ivy felt flattered. The words that Royce spoke seemed genuine and pleasant to hear. She liked the way he looked as well, even if he appeared to be a little older than she would have liked. At a guess, Ivy would have put him at 26 years of age. He had dark hair and dark eyes and a friendly-looking smile. His stature was tall and muscular, which made her feel small and petite. Prettier than she had all evening long. She smiled up at him through her eyelashes, wondering if it wouldn't be so bad after all. Royce loved the way Ivy looked as well. Her pale blonde hair had been curled up into a complicated chignon on the top of her head, and her face looked a little heavy with makeup. But underneath all of that he could tell she was a real natural beauty. Someone he very much wanted to impress. "You have a truly lovely home," Royce told Ivy. "It is wonderful. I can tell that your father has worked hard." Ivy darted her eyes towards her father and smiled. It did not escape her notice that her father had worked hard to give them the life they all had. She knew that it must have been hard for him to do it all alone. She could not remember her mother well. She had been only 2 years old when she died. But from what she had heard, she was one of those women who could do it all effortlessly. She ran the household efficiently without even batting an eye. It must have been so hard for her father to take on all of those roles on top of his own. "Thank you very much, that is kind of you to say." Lord Winters wanted to continue listening to the conversation to ensure that it all went to plan. But one of his business associates grabbed his attention and offered him a drink. He did not want to appear rude and refuse, so he attempted to do both. He tried to keep one ear out as he drank and talked. Ivy wished that she could have something more interesting to say to this mysterious duke. She felt a little silly with Royce's expectant eyes upon her. She could also tell that her father wanted her to make a good impression, which put more pressure on her shoulders to do well. Much as she did not want things to progress in the way that her father wanted, she did not want to let him down either. "It is lovely to have you here," she eventually said quietly, cringing inside. "For everyone, I mean. It was not easy for me to get the time off work. I have a very successful shipping and trading business. It is one of those things that takes up all of my time, so yes, it is good that I managed to make it." "That is wonderful news. It is not easy to make a success of shipping, is it?" Ivy simply wanted to show Royce that she was an intelligent woman. Just because she had spent most of her life stuck in the four walls of her home, not seeing much of the world, did not mean she was unaware of what was going on. Ever since she had learned to read, she had spent most of her life with her head in a book, learning as much as she possibly could. She felt very proud of herself for that. But Royce did not seem impressed. "It is not easy unless you know what you are doing," he snapped back, almost angrily. "I have worked hard to get where I am today. I am not one of those people who inherited a successful company from my father." Ivy stepped back inadvertently because Royce's words seemed so filled with hatred. It could not have been with her. She had not done anything to upset him. But she felt the sting of his rage all the same. "Oh, I see." She did not know what to say to him any longer. "I understand that." All of the pleasant emotions that Ivy had been feeling upon first meeting Royce dissipated into nothing. She had almost allowed herself to open up and believe that it would not be so terrible to start considering the man. Just at the moment he changed his attitude completely. As Ivy looked up at him, he did not look so friendly any longer. "Yes." Royce nodded slowly, almost distractedly as he answered Ivy. "You understand. Right." There was a patronizing tone as he spoke which only confirmed to Ivy that his being nice was all for a show. As soon as her father had moved away from the pair, Royce's attitude had changed completely. He wanted to seem like a good man so that her father might encourage her to wed him. But he did not care about her opinion. Most men were probably like that. But that did not mean Ivy had to accept it. She certainly did not have to pick a man to be her husband who would treat her in that way. If she was going to be forced into marriage, then she at least wanted it to be with a man worthy of her who would have some respect for her. Her expression glowered. Her father had told her not to let her fiery side out as the party progressed tonight, because it was not the right way to behave in public. But it was growing increasingly hard to do so. With this man and his arrogant attitude, all Ivy wanted to do was shoot a scathing remark at him. But she could not. She could not embarrass her father and do anything to ruin the family reputation. Reputation was vital in polite, high-class society. It took many years to build up and only a second to destroy. If Ivy did anything to ruin her father's hard work, it would also affect his life negatively and her brother's, too. She could not do that. With a deep breath, Ivy forced a small smile on her lips before making her excuses to leave. "Oh, I am terribly sorry. she said with false politeness, trying to keep up the facade of sweetness. I do believe that Ewan, my younger brother, needs my attention. I shall speak to you later on. Without waiting for him to answer her, Ivy held onto the skirts of her dress and made her way across the great hall in her home, before her father could catch up to her. Her brother was standing there, talking to one of the gentlemen who worked with their father for many years. But Ivy did not aim for him. Mary was also at the Winters' home tonight with her husband, and Ivy needed to speak to her childhood friend. Mary was always the one that the girls in the friendship group turned to for advice. She seemed to have the best way of seeing things. It was just a shame that she had not been able to get herself out of an unwanted marriage. Mary, may I ask for your assistance with something? Ivy asked through gritted teeth. Mary glanced up at her husband, silently asking for permission, which irritated Ivy no end. Why was it never the men who had to ask for permission? It did not seem fair. With the irritable way that Ivy was feeling, she feared that this might be the thing to make her snap. Thankfully, Mary's husband nodded tautly, allowing her, which meant Ivy had no reason to yell. She was getting what she wanted. A moment with her friend. Yes, of course, Lady Winters. Let us find somewhere to talk. Chapter 2. The time Ivy and Mary made it to the hallway, Ivy was ready to explode. The more she thought about the way Royce had spoken to her, the angrier she became. Oh my goodness, Mary, you would not believe it. She burst out once they were alone. My father has just made it very obvious that he would like me to spend some time getting to know Duke Royce Merrick. So I have just been speaking to him, and he is horrible. He is so terribly arrogant. I have never spoken to anyone like it. Mary hung her head low and looked like that was the one subject matter that she did not know how to discuss. It is a problem, she told her friend quietly. As you know, this is the same problem that I had. And it did not turn out well for me. She glanced her eyes towards the hall to check if anyone was listening. There might not be anything that you can do about it. How serious do you believe your father is about him? I do not know, Ivy answered honestly. He did not mention him to me beforehand. But I suppose that does not mean much. Ivy brushed her finger over her lips thoughtfully. What do you think I should do? Mary wanted desperately to help her friend. She did not want Ivy to end up in the same miserable situation as she found herself. Mary was a quieter person who could tolerate things better. But Ivy had a fiery temper, and she did not think that any marriage with her would last very long. There was no bigger stigma than divorce. Maybe you should try speaking to your father. He is a more reasonable man than mine. I just do not know what I would say, Ivy admitted sadly. I do not know how to address it. Mary stepped closer to Ivy, and leaned in so that there was no chance that anyone could overhear them, even if someone were trying to listen in. I have heard things about Duke Merrick. Will it help you to know? Ivy nodded enthusiastically. Yes, any information would be wonderful. Whatever you have heard. Mary darted her eyes from side to side, her heart racing in her chest as she relayed gossip that she probably should not have heard in the first place. I have heard that Duke Merrick is a terrible man, and that he has gambled all his money away. He is in a terrible financial state, and he needs a wealthy wife for the dowry. I heard my husband talking to one of his business associates about how he is running his business into the ground because he is more addicted to making bets than anything else. He is not concerned with making a success of himself. Ivy felt stunned into silence. She could hardly believe it. Maybe that is why he was so prickly when I tried to talk to him about his company. Perhaps I reminded him of the mess he has gotten himself into. It started to make a lot more sense. He had been angry when she discussed business, especially when she mentioned the money side of things. Maybe the change in his attitude had not been because her father was no longer listening into their conversation. But it was because of the subject matter at hand. Still, whatever the issue was, Ivy knew for certain that she did not want to marry him. He was not the man for her. "I think I shall have to speak to my father," she said decisively while smiling at her friend. "I will have to try tonight before he arranges any further meetings. I think I will tell him what I have heard. Do not worry. I will not mention any names. And I will tell my father that I am going to pick my own husband." Mary was not sure that Ivy's plan would work out. But she was also very aware that if any of her friends could change their father's mind and pick out her own husband, it would be Ivy. Ivy had never been the one to play by the rules. She was the one who liked to challenge the way that things were. So maybe this would be her first real battle. The man's world that they all existed in could not be changed by one woman, but Ivy would try. "Are you going to speak with him now? Do you need me to come with you?" The idea terrified Mary. But she would do it for her friend if Ivy asked that of her. "I can support your argument." Ivy could practically see Mary shaking as she said those words. So she touched her arm and smiled reassuringly at her. "Thank you very much, but I will be fine. I really do appreciate the offer. It is very kind of you. You have already done so much for me by giving me the information that I need to stop this before it starts." The girls waited out in the hallway for a few more moments as Ivy steeled herself, ready for the potential argument that might be about to happen. Once she presented all of her arguments calmly to her father, Ivy did not think that there was much that he could say, but she did not know how much he liked Royce. If he thought that this Duke was the right man for her, then she might find him harder to persuade. She was going to have to use everything that she had to make her father see that this marriage simply could not happen. If her father wanted the best for her, then he would understand and probably agree with her as well. He had to. "Right," she finally said. "Let us go back inside. I need to get to father before anyone else does." The hall looked the same as Ivy peered back around the door. It was almost as if everyone else at the party did not realize the life-changing decision that she had just made. There were people dancing, drinking, eating, all without a care in the world. The only person that Ivy could not see was Duke Royce Merrick. Soon, Ivy's eyes found her father and she knew that it was time. She gave Mary one last grateful look before she moved through the crowds of people with only one goal in mind. "Father." Ivy gently grabbed her father's attention from her brother who he was currently talking with. "May I have a word with you? A private word alone?" Lord Winters gave Ewan a look, suggesting that he was to be the host for the time being. He might have only been 18 years of age, but Ewan was known for his maturity, which was why so many people wanted to work with him. He was a great boy who would end up a wonderful man. Ivy and her father left the hall and walked towards his home office where he held his most private meetings. Some of the most important moments of Lord Winters' career had happened in this room. "Is everything all right?" he asked his daughter as soon as they were inside. "You look like you have a lot on your mind. Is there anything that I can help you with?" "Yes, there is." Ivy could not sit down, she found her feet pacing up and down the room. "I do not like Duke Royce Merrick. I know that you like him for me. But he is not a nice person." "But you did not speak to him for very long." Lord Winters felt confused. "You left him after a few moments." "Yes, because of his arrogance." Ivy nodded fervently. "He did not speak to me well at all." Lord Winters knew that he would have to handle this delicately. His daughter and her strong opinions had caused him many issues over time. "I understand that. But first impressions are not always right. It is not just that. There is more." Ivy moved closer to her father, wanting him to see just how serious she was. "I have heard that he also has a gambling problem and that he needs a big dowry." Lord Winters did not think this was correct. He had researched Duke Merrick a lot before inviting him to the party to ensure that he was a suitable match for his daughter. And he had heard nothing of the sort. "Who has said this?" he demanded. "I do not think it is the case. Duke Merrick has a very successful business." "But how much do you know about the shipping trade?" Ivy demanded. "Are there not ways that he could disguise his gambling? Maybe getting married is the next step in covering his tracks." Lord Winters did not know what to say to that. He did not ever like to associate with less than savory business types. But he knew they existed. Men who had gotten themselves into financial trouble, often through the use of gambling, became desperate enough to do anything to cover their debts. To him, Duke Merrick did not seem the type of man to do that. But he could not be certain. He could not guarantee that was not the case. "Father, I do not want to spend any more time with him," Ivy insisted, pressing the point further. "I do not like him. I do not want even to consider getting married to him. I will never be able to trust him." This was what Lord Winters feared. The last thing he wanted to do was make his daughter unhappy, and by looking into her eyes, he could see he would be doing just that. Maybe she was a little stubborn and opinionated, but if she had made up her mind, then he did not want to do anything to change it. "I will speak to him," he eventually told her decidedly. "Duke Merrick has expressed an interest in spending more time with you. So I will be sure to let him know that is not going to happen." Lord Winters paused, waiting for the moment that Ivy might back down and give him just one more try. But it was instantly clear from the flash behind her eyes that she was sticking to her demand with this one. He rose from his seat, thinking that his wife would have been proud to see their daughter being so decisive. They were alike in a lot of ways. Ivy's mother was also a very determined woman. One who could have changed the world if she had lived longer. He had to let his daughter make her own decisions. "Please go back to the party and speak to other people. I know Duke Merrick is not the only person who wishes to make your acquaintance. I will speak with him now and clear things up." Ivy nodded and agreed with him. But she did not head into the hall right away. She first needed a moment alone to get her thoughts together. Plus, she did not want to witness her father talking to Duke Merrick. That was something she simply wanted to happen without her there. She wanted to forget she had ever met him at all. Ivy was simply grateful that she did not have to see him again. Thank goodness she had worked up the courage to speak to her father to sort this out before it got more complex. As for speaking to other men, well, that was unlikely to happen anyway. But Ivy had already asked too much of her father today. She could not do more. For the rest of the night, she would have to play the doting daughter. Whatever that took. Chapter 3. Ivy did not leave her bedroom again until she heard a lot of commotion coming from the downstairs area, and that was only because curiosity had gotten the better of her. If there was some drama going on inside her house, she needed to know what it was. Especially if it would end up being the sort of thing that everyone talked about for days and weeks afterward. She did not want to miss out, so Ivy left the safety of her bedroom in a hunt for whatever it was. She would curse herself forever if she missed it out of fear. Walking down the stairs, Ivy immediately noticed that not one set of eyes were upon her. She was certainly not the center of attention any longer. But somehow that was not the good feeling that she expected it to be. It created a small ball of panic in her chest as she tried to figure out what captivated everyone instead. "What is happening?" Ivy asked the first person that she got near, but they were too distracted to answer. "What is going on here?" She suddenly noticed that all eyes were focused on something in particular. But she did not have the height to see over the heads of her father's guests. "What is everyone looking at?" Ivy parted the crowd. People moved as they let her in to see what had caused all of this. And as soon as she got her answer, she understood why. No one knew how to find the words to explain. They simply let her see because that was easier for them. How could anyone explain the scene that lay in front of her without crumbling? Oh my goodness. Ivy's hands clapped loudly to her mouth in shock as she drank it in. Father. Her father, the man she loved more than anyone else, lay unconscious on the floor in the middle of his own ballroom, as two men dragged him up onto a board. His eyes had rolled into the back of his head. His skin had taken on a very pale color. He looked like he had no life in him. The sight was unlike anything that Ivy had seen before, and it made her feel ill. How could this be? Her father never got sick. He saw illness as a weakness, and he was never weak. Is he dead? She stammered out desperately to anyone who would listen. What happened? How can this be? It was not so long ago that she was speaking with her father, having a very normal conversation with him in his office. And there was no sign whatsoever that he was about to be sick then. He appeared to be absolutely fine, the picture of health just as he always was. Ivy did not know how long she had been upstairs, hiding away and avoiding the party. But it definitely wasn't long. Not long enough for her whole world to change. "Excuse me, Mom," one of the doctors, who have already been fetched, said to her, trying to get her to move out of the way. In her panic, she had blocked them in. "We must get this man to a hospital immediately. He needs urgent medical attention. We shall have to go to the nearest hospital." Urgent medical attention, surely those words had to be positive. The man would have worded things very differently if he were no longer living. And they would not be taking him to a hospital. But none of this felt very positive to Ivy. In fact, she felt the world was spinning and churning beneath her. Her feet were not on the floor. They were floating. Ivy's head spun as she thought about how terrible this was. Her father was the only parent that Ivy had left. She did not know what she would do without him. She could not lose him now. She still felt much too young to tackle the world on her own. It was the very reason she did not want a husband yet. She was quite content to remain living at home with her family where she felt happy and safe. She was in such a state of shock, as was everyone else in the party, that no one contradicted where Lord Winters was being taken. Usually, the wealthy would be treated at home. But in his case, it appeared to be too severe for that. The nearest hospital was not a desirable place either. It was not the worst in the city, but not a place that anyone particularly wanted to find themselves. But if he needed attention urgently, then what could anyone do? "Where is Ewan?" Ivy asked desperately. Her eyes flicked over the crowd, but her vision had blurred with shock, and she could barely see anything. "Where is my brother? We must sort this out together." No one gave her an answer. It was almost as if she found herself in a room of people who suddenly became mute. Why did no one want to tell her anything? What had she missed? Ivy racked her brain, but all she could think about was telling her father that she did not want to marry Duke Merrick. Had that caused him so much stress that it had sent him to the medical room? If only Ivy could find her brother, she could get some answers. She pressed her back against the wall and watched helplessly as the men took her father from the room, effectively ending the party for her. She had wanted something to happen to put an end to all of this, but nothing to affect her family members. She had already lost her mother. Was that not enough? She could not go through that pain again, and this time would be so much worse. Because she remembered her father, they had a bond. Ivy's fingers clawed at the wall behind her while her heart thumped loudly and painfully in her chest. Suddenly, the corset she was wearing felt tight and restrictive. It prevented her from getting enough air into her lungs. Ivy felt lightheaded and nauseous. She wanted every single person to go so she could sort this out. Somehow. Not that she had a plan to do anything to make this okay. She simply did not want to be surrounded any longer. "Are you all right?" Mary's very welcome voice burst into Ivy's brain. "This is a nightmare." Ivy turned and gave her friend a desperate look, tugging at every single one of Mary's heartstrings. "I do not understand what has happened," she pleaded with Mary. I was not in the room. Mary took a step back as she realized what she was going to tell her friend. It was something that would break Ivy's heart, which in turn made her feel terrible. But the poor lady needed to know. Ewan has been arrested, did you not see that? Ivy did not answer. But the way that all of the color drained from her cheeks gave Mary all the information that she needed to know. She knew nothing. Mary was going to have to spill it all. The police officer believed that your brother poisoned your father. Poisoning? That word barely registered in Ivy's brain. What do you mean? I did not hear it all. Mary replied helplessly. Only that they think your father has been poisoned, and for some reason, they think the person who would do that to him is your brother. Could it be? Ivy despised herself for even giving that thought any space in her brain. But she did not like believing that the police would make a mistake. The law enforcement was there to keep everyone safe. Society needed them. Ivy never had any reason at all to doubt them before. Would Ewan do that? But she already knew that he would not. Ewan had no reason to do such a heinous thing to the only parent they had left. He had as good a relationship with their father as she did. As far as Ivy was concerned, they were an extremely close-knit family. None of them had any need to do something terrible to one another. But if it wasn't Ewan, then who was it? Someone else had to have done it. And it was probably someone who remained in the Winters' home. Exclaiming in fake sympathy as her father was carted off to the hospital to be taken care of by doctors who might not be able to save his life. He could die, and the killer would be here. I need everyone to go, Ivy told Mary rapidly. I need to be alone. I need to figure this out. Are you sure that you want everyone to leave? Mary replied cautiously. Because once they do, you will be completely by yourself. With your father in the hospital and your brother locked up. Ivy did not like the idea. She was never one for being completely by herself. But she could not stand these people around her any longer either. She would not be able to trust any of them knowing that someone meant her father harm. The staff would be in the house anyway. There would be people about. I want to be alone, she told her friend determinedly. I will be able to think then. I shall get my husband to clear the place out. You should get your space now. Mary knew that Ivy could fall apart now, which could manifest in many different ways. Her family had been through enough tonight. The Winters' name would be dragged through the mud enough with all of this. She did not want to make it worse. Not that it could get much worse. Maybe go to your bedroom until the house has cleared out. I think I shall go outside. Ivy lifted up her skirts and moved towards the door. I would like some fresh air. There was a prickle on the back of Ivy's neck as she stalked outside. But she refused to give whoever it was the satisfaction of turning back around to face them. Of all the fears that she had, all the ways that she had reeled in her behavior tonight, it was not like her to do any damage to the family reputation at all. My father has been poisoned, she thought to herself, needing to find some way to process that. Right now, it felt like a horrible nightmare. His life might be in grave danger and Ewan is being blamed. It did not make any sense at all. Ivy knew for certain that even if her brother did have troubles, he would never resort to that. He loved her too much to put her through any more than she had already suffered. He would not do it. So, that only left her with one question, and it was one that she did not like: who would do it? As far as Ivy knew, her jolly, fun father was a well-liked man. She never met anyone who did not like him, but maybe it was not a personal attack. Perhaps it was something business-related. There could have been people out there in the city who did not appreciate her father's success. And maybe they wanted him to suffer the ultimate price for it. She had not heard of anything like this happening before. But she had read enough books to know that it did. There were desperate people in the world who would do anything for money. Whatever was happening, Ivy immediately knew that she needed to find out before her brother got into real trouble. If she could, she would have taken a carriage to the hospital or the jail to find out more. But she could not do that alone at night. It simply was not acceptable behavior. As horrible as it would be, she would have to wait until the morning before she could see anyone in her family. Please, keep them safe. Ivy tilted her head and looked towards the heavens. Keep them both safe until I can see them tomorrow. I will do anything if you do. Chapter 4. Lady Winters? Ivy almost cried out in anger as someone interrupted her quiet moment of prayer. There were plenty of people around her, in the outside area of her home, as they all waited for their carriages to leave. But none of them bothered to speak to them. Except for this one person. I am terribly sorry to disturb you. I understand that this is a very difficult time. I just wanted to see if you are all right. As Ivy turned around to see who was attached to that voice, she tried her hardest to keep herself calm. This was simply someone who wanted to offer her some kind words in this challenging time. She could not shoot them down for that. If this entire situation had happened to someone else, she would probably be the same. But then she realized who it was, and all niceties completely vanished. This was a man that she definitely did not like. It was a man who had treated her badly. And it was also the person that she had sent her father to speak to. Could this be him? The last person to see him healthy? He had a possible motivation for wanting to act in such a way. Maybe he really did not take rejection well. And the news that Lady Winters did not want to marry him was too much. He would have to be a terrible person to always carry poison with him. But it was not impossible. You need to leave, she told him coldly. Everyone is leaving now, as you can see, and I want you to go. Royce took a step closer to Ivy, almost as if she had not spoken at all. He was such an arrogant man that even the words "go now" were not enough. It really seemed like it could have been him. I just want to make sure that you are all right first. It is not right to leave a lady in distress. I do not have time for this. Ivy's shoulders hunched up around her ears as she became increasingly defensive. I do not know if you are aware, but my father has been taken to the hospital and my brother has been arrested for a crime that he did not commit. I am left alone with this mess. I do not have time to talk to a stranger. Royce flinched at the word stranger. It appeared to Ivy that it hurt him. Just because they had shared a short conversation, did not make them acquaintances. Never mind friends. As far as Ivy was concerned, he was a stranger and that was all he would ever be. Unless the worst had happened. If he had done what she feared he might have, then he would become her enemy and she would do whatever it took to ensure his punishment. I wanted to see if there is anything that I could do for you. But if you are going to be like that, Duke Merrick, your company is unwelcome. Ivy snapped. Everything that she had been holding in since the moment she first met him came spilling right now. You were incredibly rude to me earlier. The way that you spoke to me as if I was a lesser being made me feel very uncomfortable. Then, I learned that you have a lot of dark secrets, including a gambling problem and a lot of debt. So I shall make myself very clear now. I will not give you a dowry. You shall not marry me for my family's money. If that is your aim, then you should stop now. That is not what any of this is about. Royce looked genuinely shocked. I cannot believe that you would say that. I do not know where you're getting your information from. But it is untrue. Maybe if the situation had been different, Ivy would have taken the time to hear him out. She was not usually one to jump to conclusions about other people's characters without at least giving them a chance. But this was not another situation, and Ivy had a whole lot of other things to deal with. People do not tell me things that are untrue. She would not spill her name. But Ivy trusted Mary's words implicitly. She did not think that her friend would lie to her. Mary had no reason to do so. I believe that you are not who you portray yourself to be, And with everything else that has happened tonight, I do not think that this is a conversation that should even be happening. The anger bubbled and boiled. It burned in Ivy's stomach. Did you not see my father being taken away on a stretcher to a hospital, nonetheless? Does that not tell you how serious this is? Did you not see my brother being arrested? In a moment of shock, Ivy fell backward onto a large stone outside of her home where she rested, probably dirtying up her beautiful green dress, and she let her head fall into her hands. The loneliness that she had not really contemplated up until this moment hit her hard. She was truly alone in all of this now. She had no one to rely on to help solve this. Without an adult or a man of the house, it was all down to her. Ivy had led a very carefree life. Aside from the loss of her mother, she had never had anything really negative to deal with. If the Winters family had ever faced problems, her father had shielded her from it. Probably even more so than Ewan, who, even though he was younger, was male and treated differently. This was exactly why she should not have been treated differently for being a female, because now there was not anyone around and she did not know how to cope. Ivy wanted to do something, but she did not know where to begin. "I can help you," Royce continued softly, ignoring all the insults that she had just thrown his way. "I know this must be a difficult mess that you find yourself in, and I can help you out with it." The offer was so tempting, it was exactly what Ivy wanted to hear. But because she had a lot of suspicion for this person, she simply could not take it. If Duke Merrick was willing to poison her father because she turned down his marriage proposal, then what would he be willing to do to her? This could be a dangerous man. "I do not wish for anyone to do anything," she told Royce wearily. "I simply want to be left alone." Royce nodded slowly, looking very uncomfortable. Ivy narrowed her eyes as she attempted to work out what that look meant. Was it guilt, or was it because he did not want to leave her so helpless? "I shall write down my address for you and leave it by your front door," he eventually said. "That way, if you need any help, I can be there for you. I do not want you to think that you are alone." Ivy parted her lips, ready to reply to this kind comment even if she did not think much of Royce at the moment. But she could not seem to manage it. A thick ball of emotion had lodged itself firmly in her throat, and she knew that the moment any words burst out of her lips, she would burst into sobbing tears. She could barely hold it in any longer. She needed to have that cry. But that was something she wished to do alone. "Goodbye, Lady Ivy Winters." Royce sounded reluctant. "I hope that I shall hear from you soon." Finally, he left, taking a warmth with him. But Ivy knew that was only because he was the last person around. From the sound of it, Mary and her husband had cleared out the rest of the house so that she could be alone. Now, it was only her and the house staff, and the memory of what had just happened. Sucking in a deep breath of the fresh air, Ivy worked up the courage to head back inside. She hoped that without everyone around her, staring at her as if she was some sort of exhibit, which she would be able to work out a little bit more of what had happened. Ivy was angry at herself. She could not believe that she had been upstairs wallowing in something that really meant nothing, while her family was torn apart. She shook her head angrily at herself, promising that if things turned out all right in the end, that she would not behave so childishly and selfishly again. She would start to grow up and act more like her age. Maybe she would even do what her father wanted and actively look for a husband. Anything to take the pressure off his shoulders. Nothing, Ivy thought to herself as she wandered through the hall, searching for some sort of meaning. Even if it was some sort of stirring in her chest. Absolutely nothing. Disappointment consumed her, almost swallowed her up whole, making the tears flow harder. Why is there nothing? I need something. Lady Winters? The quiet voice of one of the handmaidens called out to her. Would you like some help getting ready for bed? I know that this is not the best time, but I am sure you need to sleep. Ivy did not think she would ever be able to sleep again. Even though there was an exhaustion in her body, her brain buzzed with alertness. It was either that or wander around this hall all night long, just waiting for the morning light to burst into the room so she could go to the hospital or the prison. At least if she was lying in her bed, she could work out a proper plan in her mind. "Yes," she whispered. "Thank you very much." The young girl went with Ivy up the stairs to her bedroom and helped her undress. They did this in silence, not even speaking as the girl washed Ivy's body. Ivy did not have the energy to speak. She could not think of anything to say, and it seemed that the handmaiden was lost for words, as well. This whole evening had been a real shock to everyone, no one saw it coming. So now they were all utterly lost. It was not until Ivy climbed into the sheets that she finally spoke out. "Will you stay with me for a while?" she asked quietly. "Just for a little bit. I know that you have things to do." The handmaiden nodded and took a seat by Ivy's bed. Eventually, the girl also reached out and took the lady's hand in hers, in what she hoped was a comforting way. All the staff in the Winters home knew that Ivy was fiery, but also a little lost. None of them knew how the lady would cope without her father and brother, and they were all frightened for her. As the girl watched Ivy lying there, like a scared child in her bed, she hoped that this would all be some big misunderstanding and that everything would be okay in the long run. For all of their sakes. Everyone would suffer if things completely fell apart. Ivy stared up at the ceiling, clinging to this girl's hand as if it was the only thing keeping her fixed on the earth. She knew that it was pathetic and childish. Certainly not the more adult way that she wanted to begin behaving. But just for tonight, she was afraid. In just a few short moments, her entire world had been turned upside down. If this did turn out to be the work of Duke Merrick, then she had no idea what she was going to do. Fury would not even begin to cover her emotions. She would lose it completely. But first, she needed to be sure. Just because he had a potential motive and an opportunity, did not mean that he had definitely done it. Somehow, Ivy would have to be patient. Chapter 5. Anxiety raced through Ivy's system as she stepped into the one building that she never thought that she would come to. The local jail where her brother was being held. It was one of those places which she often passed while in her carriage, heading towards the shops to buy herself a brand new outfit or two, but barely even shot a glance towards the grey, crumbling, rotting building. It was ugly, unappealing, and injected a spike of horror into absolutely everyone. No one wanted to end up there, and that was exactly how it should be. The smell hit Ivy first. The disgusting scent of a building that was never cleaned, and filled with men who did not have any cleaning facilities either. For someone who lived in a home which came with staff to take care of everything for her, this was a huge shock. Undoubtedly, Yoon was not having the best time either. "I cannot believe that my baby brother is here," she thought with a little shiver. "It is horrible." Yoon was not a spoiled child, but he had lived a life sheltered by the protection of his lovely home and his name. He was not weak, but this was not an environment in which he would survive well. Ivy had struggled through the last few days, worrying about her brother while she waited for a distant male cousin whom she barely knew to come with her. She could not visit alone, so she had been forced to wait for Jonathan Winters to arrive. He was a very quiet man, a year younger than her. But unfortunately, right now she needed him. Inside this prison, she knew more than ever that she needed to solve this mystery quickly and get Yoon out of here. Especially before there was any chance of him receiving a punishment. There were not many prisons built, not even in London. So jails and prisons shared the same space, which meant prisoners had to be dealt with quickly and harshly. Again, this was something that Ivy had never had an issue with before. She knew that prisoners deserved to be punished. But she had never considered the idea of that affecting her family before. She did not want Yoon to be transported to America or Australia. And she certainly did not want him to face the death penalty. If he were found guilty of the crime of murder, especially that of his father. Anything would be possible. "How may I help you, sir?" one of the stern-looking guards asked Jonathan. Ivy could feel his eyes darting towards her as if she did not belong. Maybe her outfit was not suitable for a place like this. Ivy had not thought much about it when she allowed her handmaidens to dress her in the morning. But now she felt out of place. "I would like to visit with my cousin," Jonathan said with a grave tone of voice. "Lord Ewan Winters." Ivy held her head up high and jutted out her chin while she stood beside her cousin. She felt intimidated inside and she could not allow that to show. Her father was always confident and strong, as well as friendly, and that was something she wished to emulate. Since Ivy was not familiar with the prison system, she did not know if visits were acceptable. Luckily, she was aware that they were never well run, so she did not think that many rules would apply. "Oh, I see." The guard nodded his head a couple of times. "I will see what I can do. Please, take a seat." But as Ivy glanced around, she realized that she did not wish to sit anywhere here. Every scrap of the building seemed to have a layer of grime across it. It was challenging enough for her not to let her nose screw up in disgust. There was no way that she could keep her composure up if she had to sit herself down. She stood up straight, clasped her hands together, and waited for the man to return with hopefully positive news. Jonathan took her cue and stood beside her. "I do not think that it will be possible," the man told them both regretfully. "I am not sure we can arrange a meeting." The anger inside of Ivy had not subsided. It remained to bubble there all night long and now hardened her facial expression as a determination flooded her. She could not help but speak. "I am here to see my brother, and I am not leaving until I do." The man sucked in a deep breath of air, staring at Ivy with wide eyes as if he did not expect a reaction like that. If he had any experience with the upper classes at all, he obviously would do exactly as he was told and walk away with his head down, not wanting to create a scene. People would want to keep any criminal issues a secret in an attempt to salvage any of the reputations that they had left. But Ivy was desperate. If she had to create a scene, she would. She had nothing left. Her father was lying in a hospital bed clinging to life. Or so she hoped he was still alive. And she needed Ewan. "I would like to speak with my brother," she reiterated. "I need to find out what is happening." The man looked around the room as if he was searching for some escape. But he did not see one. Eventually, he nodded at Ivy and Jonathan, and he indicated with a flick of the finger for them to follow him. Ivy resisted the urge to wipe her forehead to remove the sheen of perspiration that stuck there. She needed to excuse herself to spend some time to make herself look better. But the time for that had passed. She found herself walking through a hallway of prison cells, refusing to look inside, even as some of the men inside called out to her, making lewd and uncouth remarks. Ivy kept her eyes faced forward. She was doing this for her brother. If she kept Ewan at the forefront of her mind, it all felt worth it. The guard unlocked the cell where a man dressed in rags curled over himself in the corner. It took Ivy a few seconds to realize that this was her brother. He already looked like someone who did not come from money at all. How had he become so unclean already? It was not even just the clothes, it was him. It had been mere days. "Ewan?" Ivy asked curiously, cocking her head in his direction. "Ewan, are you all right?" He turned to face her, flashing his blue, terrified eyes in his sister's direction. The grime across his cheeks made Ivy visibly shudder. Gone was the strong man in a suit that networked at the party last night, and he had been replaced by a child who needed someone to hug him tightly. Ivy almost cried. Jonathan held back. This might have been his family, but he did not know them at all. He was not sure about coming at all because of the possible tarnish to his reputation. But a sense of duty and his mother had forced him here. "Ewan, What happened that night? She asked desperately. I missed it. I was not there. Ewan glanced behind her, indicating towards the guard who remained at the cell door. Ivy had already pushed her luck enough. She did not think she could make him leave, too. It is fine, she said quietly with a very insistent tone. Just tell me. I need to know. Ewan hung his head low and sighed. I do not know. I was talking to Mr. Smith one moment. Then I went to find Father to talk to him about you actually. He let out a mirthless laugh. I wanted to know how you were getting on. But I did not get to speak much to him because he collapsed to the ground just as I arrived. Why do they think that you poisoned him? Ivy needed to know. I do not understand that. I do not either. Ewan replied desperately. I believe it is simply because I was standing near him. How is Father? No one will tell me anything. Is he? His face turned pale. He is still alive? Ivy felt her chest tighten, panic set in. She had been trying to focus more on Ewan, so she did not have to worry about her father's current state. But now that wound had been burst open, and it terrified her. If her father passed away, she and Ewan, if he ever got out of this horrible cell, would have to fend for themselves. I have not been to the hospital yet. I came here first. I am afraid to find out. Ewan looked like he might be sick. It was clear that he was terrified to learn that his father might not have survived. If Ivy had even a scrap of doubt in her mind, the look on her brother's face completely erased that. Why is he in the hospital? Why is he not at home? Ivy did not know how to answer that. She felt like she had weakly allowed it to happen because she was in a state of shock. Now, she needed to fix it. I shall go this afternoon once I have finished speaking with you. Ivy felt determined to face this for Ewan. I will ensure that you know what is happening. I know that it must be torture for you being in here. Ewan nodded sharply. It is horrible, I absolutely hate it. Especially since I do not belong here. Ivy leaned in closer to her brother. Now was the time for her to get her suspicions out so that she could get Ewan's opinion on the matter. Her brother had seen far more than she did. There might be something that he knew. So, if you did not get to Father in time, then who was near him when you arrived? Who was he talking to? Ewan shook his head helplessly. I do not know. I was not paying attention. This frustrated Ivy. Do you know Duke Merrick? Was he around? Do you know something? Hope built in Ewan's eyes. I thought you did not see anything. I did not, but just before it happened, I sent Father off to speak to Duke Merrick to tell him that I did not want to see him again. Ivy felt guilty. This was more her fault than her brother's. We shared a short conversation when I knew that I did not like him. I suspected he might approach Father and ask to court me. So I put a stop to it before it could happen. Father said that he would talk to him, which happened just before. Ewan pushed himself into a standing position as hope filled him. He had spent the entire night panicking that this was going to be his future. So to hear that his sister might know something was hopeful. You think he might have wanted to get revenge for your rejection? It is possible. I have heard all sorts of other things about him, too. That he has a gambling issue and that he has run his business into the ground. So he needs a wife who comes with a large enough dowry to help him. You. Ewan gasped. He had his heart set on you. So he got annoyed. Hearing Ewan confirm what Ivy already suspected made her even more determined. She could not see her brother blamed for something that he did not do. Not when she might have lost her father. What shall I do? Ivy asked her brother. How can I make this better? Ewan tapped his chin thoughtfully. He knew that one wrong move could affect his life for the worst, and he did not want that to happen. Ivy was the only person who could help him escape this hell. "You need to see Duke Merrick," he said to her. "You need to find out more about him and work out what sort of person he is. You need to find out if this is something that he might have done." "But won't that be dangerous?" Ivy wanted to help her brother, but she was scared. "Do not allow yourself to be alone with him. That is not a good idea anyway. Keep it public, but try to find some evidence." Ewan felt terrible for everything that he was putting on his sister's shoulders. But he really did not have any other option. "I would not ask you to do this if I thought that there was any other way." Ivy nodded, even as she felt the color drain from her face. She would do it. She was going to have to salvage the Winters family. She could not stay protected and hidden away from the world forever. Chapter 6. Ivy could hardly understand it. The hospital was even worse than the prison. It was dirtier, busier, and filled her with even more fear. Usually, when anyone in her home needed to seek the help of a medical professional, they would have someone come to their house to take care of them. But because of the situation last night, her father was taken away and brought to this place. It felt more like an environment where someone would come to die, rather than a place of healing. It felt utterly riddled with disease. "It is not the worst," she reminded herself. "The working class has hospitals that are much worse than this. I simply need to get him out of here. I need to speak to someone about my father," Ivy demanded as she found a lady in a matron's outfit. Jonathan remained with her, but this time she felt confident to take the lead. "He was brought in here last night, and I would like to know what has happened to him." Her heart thumped against her chest. She could almost feel her knees knocked together with nerves. This could be the moment that she learned her father had passed away, and that was something she could not be strong about. "What is his name?" the lady asked her kindly. "I will find out what room he is in." "Lord Otto Winters." Ivy did not miss the way that the matron's eyes widened at the name. That made her even more fearful. "He was taken from our home last night, and I believe it was suspected poisoning. We have got your father in a room on his own. Please, come with me." At least he was not in a room with hundreds of other people. That was what scared Ivy the most. She feared that even if he managed to recover from the poisoning, he would become sick from something else. Ivy tried to focus on that one positive rather than all of the negatives that surrounded the situation. "He is in here. I shall get one of the doctors to come in and explain his health to you as soon as possible." The matron left Ivy alone with her father, with Jonathan making his excuses to wait outside the room also, and she took a step closer to see him properly. The image of the strong man, who had spent his entire life taking care of her, looking weak and sickly in that bed, was devastating. He did not look like the same person. It was almost as if the life had been completely sucked from him. Seeing his chest rising and falling as he breathed gave her a glimmer of hope. "I am so sorry," Ivy gushed as she took her father's lifeless hand. "I am sorry that this happened to you." She did not know if he could hear her. He was probably completely switched off from the world, but Ivy felt like she needed to say the words anyway. "I did not think that sending you off to speak to Duke Merrick would end up this way. I would have done it myself if not." Emotion choked in her throat, stopping her for just a moment. When she started to speak again, her voice kept cracking. "I did not know that he was dangerous. I am not sure if you know, you probably do not, but Ewan has been arrested for the crime. For some reason, the police believe that he is the one who poisoned you. But I am going to solve this. I will make this all right." Ivy sat there for a moment, just holding on to her father's cold hand and looking at him. As far as she knew, he was mostly a well-liked man. She still could not think of any other enemies. It had to be Royce. There was no one else who would even consider doing this. No one else had reason to. I will find out who did this to you for certain, she muttered, more to herself this time. I will do whatever I need to do. I will put myself in the line of danger to make this right. It is not right. At that moment, she could not contain herself any longer. The tears streamed from her eyes and Ivy allowed them to fall. She did not even care that she was in public. She did not mind that it was not the right way to behave. She was upset. And she wanted to simply feel her emotions. There was not anyone here who would confront her about this anyway. Of all the places she was allowed to fall apart, surely this was it. Plus, she had spent her morning in the prison. So her emotions were already scattered over the place. I do not want to leave you here. It feels so wrong, she said while glancing her eyes around the room. Maybe I shall ask someone to bring you home. And we can pay for a doctor to see you there. Needing to do something positive, Ivy instantly rose from her seat and set out to find the nearest doctor. She asked about the possibility of having him at home. But unfortunately, it was not possible right away. Because the doctors suspected that he had been poisoned. He needed to be under constant observation. They had to have someone checking in on him all hours throughout the day, and the only way they could do that was to keep him in this room. Ivy did manage to persuade the doctor to promise to send him home at the very first opportunity, which would have to keep her calm for the time being. It was not enough, but it was all that she could do. Ivy felt terrible as she said goodbye to her father and she left the hospital building. She did not want to leave him behind. But now she knew exactly where everyone was, what state they were all in, and what she needed to do. She had a plan now. She needed to get closer to Duke Merrick. She just needed to work out how she was going to make that happen. It was one of those things that seemed much easier said than done. Ivy felt deflated as the carriage pulled up to her home. After she had left Jonathan, who thankfully insisted that he would come back whenever he was needed to assist her. All the positivity had raced from her body as she tried to work out what her next step should be. Nothing immediately came to mind. Of course, she would write a letter to her brother and inform him that their father was alive but in an unconscious state. But then the real work would begin. She would have to find a way to speak to Duke Merrick. The housekeeper stood at the door entrance, as if she was waiting for Ivy. "Oh, Lady Winters. I am so glad that you are back. Lady Turner is here. She insisted that she would wait to see you." Lady Turner? It took Ivy a couple of seconds to recognize her friend's married name. "Oh, you mean Mary? Of course, I do want to see her. That is wonderful that she is here." Ivy's mood lifted. Mary had come to see her because she cared. And that meant a lot. Plus, Ivy needed some of her wisdom and advice. This was the sort of thing that Mary would easily concoct a plan for. Ivy found her friend sitting in the drawing room, sipping a cup of tea. Relief flooded her. And she managed the first genuine smile that had crossed her face all day long. "Oh my goodness, I am pleased to see you. You have been out all day," Mary commented as she rose to embrace her friend. "Is everything all right?" "I have been to the prison and then to the hospital. It has been a very busy day for me." Mary felt shocked that her friend had done so much in one day. She knew how much of a harrowing experience that must have been. It would not be easy for anyone, but especially not for Ivy. "Oh my, that must have been hard." Ivy nodded. "I am very proud of you for tackling everything." Ivy took her seat and Mary did the same. "Ewan did not do this, he did not poison my father. He was not even near him before it happened. When I spoke to him today, he said that he arrived just as he collapsed." "You believe that he is telling the truth?" Mary did not like to ask that. But she needed to make sure that she covered all bases. And that Ivy was not letting her family bond cloud her judgment. "I know that he is." I saw it in his eyes. Plus. Ivy paused for a second to check that none of the staff were around to listen in. I have reason to believe that it was Duke Merrick. It happened just after I told my father to turn down any request for spending more time together. I believe he did not take the news well. Mary was taken aback. She did not know how to take that news at all. She was the one who had told Ivy that Duke Merrick had a terrible reputation. But she did not think that he would go this far. But maybe that was her being naive. Her father had always told her to be fearful of a desperate man. Duke Merrick was desperate. But poisoning your father would not ensure that he got money. Mary queried. It would do nothing. But it would be revenge. I think that he did it for revenge. Ivy was determined to stick to her theory now. It was the only thing that made any sense at all. And now I need proof of that to free Ewan. Are you planning on telling Duke Merrick that you have changed your mind? What do you mean? Ivy gave her friend a curious look. Changed my mind about what? About wanting to marry him? Surely that would be a good way to ensure that he spends more time with you. Ivy had not thought about that. But Mary was right. In that way, they would have to be around other people. Someone would have to chaperone them. So she could not find herself in any danger. But it would also get her close enough to hunt for clues. That was much better than anything she could have come up with alone. But how will I make that happen? She asked Mary desperately. My father is not here to write the letter for me. Ewan is locked away. And I have just sent Jonathan away. If he is not here to request the meeting, then what can I do? Write it yourself. Mary answered spontaneously. Duke Merrick understands that you are currently in a very difficult situation. Just like the rest of society does. I do not think that he will judge you. Ivy nodded, hoping that Mary was right. It scared the hell out of her. But if she was going to have to do this, then this was the best way. The safest way. She would have to search inside of her for all of her courage and face this head-on. If she thought about her brother and her father, then she could do it for them. Will you help me write the letter? I want to get this done now. I do not want Ewan to be in that terrible place any longer than he needs to be. I do not think that he is doing too well. Mary had not ever been in a prison herself. Thankfully she never had reason to. But she had heard things. Dreadful things, and she could not imagine Ivy's younger brother coping. Let us start now. The sooner we get this letter sent off, the sooner we can find out what truly happened on the night of your party. Because right now it is a mystery that really needs solving. Yes, let's. No one wants this mystery solved more than me. I just want my family back together and for my life to go back to normal. I want this to all be nothing more than a terrible dream that I can wake up from. Chapter 7. March 4, 1832. Regent Street, Mayfair, London. Dear Duke Merrick, I take a pen in my hand to write to you with a heavy, apologetic heart. I am terribly sorry to communicate with you directly, rather than to go through the proper channels. But as I am sure you are aware, my father is currently indisposed, so it is impossible for me to do things in the right way. I would like to request a meeting with you if that is at all possible. My behavior at the party was not as I usually am. I found myself under a lot of undue stress on that day. And I would like to say sorry to your face for that. I am also aware that you wished to spend time with me too. And that is something I am open to. Faithfully, Lady Ivy Winters. Royce stared at the letter in confusion, wondering what it all meant. After the events of the party, he had not ever expected to hear from Lady Ivy Winters again. He assumed that he had done something to upset her and that she simply did not like him. Much as that disappointed him, he had come to accept it. So, this letter arriving as if from nowhere was a huge shock to him. But he found it to be a pleasant surprise. Without taking too much time to consider it, he grabbed his quill, and he wrote out a reply. March 9, 1832. Baker Street, London. Dear Lady Ivy Winters, thank you for your favor. It was wonderful to receive. I am terribly sorry to hear that your father is still unwell. I hope that his situation improves soon. The whole of London was saddened to hear what had happened. I would very much like to spend some more time with you, and will come to visit you at your home on the 15th if that is suitable. I expect you will have someone there who can chaperone us. Faithfully, Duke Royce Merrick. He did not know how this meeting would work out, but he was intrigued. The last time he had seen Lady Winters, she showed a fire that he admired greatly, and he wanted to know more about her. Of all the ladies that he had spent any time with during the seasons of London, he had never found someone that captivated him. That was why he had not settled down. He had focused on his career because that seemed easier. Maybe this meeting was purely because Lady Winters needed a husband now that her father had suffered. Maybe she did not like him at all. But that was something that he could figure out once they were together. He hoped that was not the case. That would come as a huge disappointment to him. But he would not be able to find out if he did not give it a try. Then he would be left with a lot of unanswered questions. In fact, the more that he thought about seeing Lady Winters again, the happier he became. Ivy could not stop herself from continually peering out of the window as she waited for the arrival of Duke Merrick. It was his plan to meet at her home, which might not have been what she initially wanted. But now it felt like it was for the best. She needed to get used to spending time with him before she did anything rash. Are you feeling all right? Jonathan asked her cautiously. Ivy had felt terrible asking him to take more time out of his busy life to assist her. But she found herself unable to find anyone else. He had made the offer anyway. I believe so, Ivy answered with a deep breath. I shall be all right soon. But then she spotted the carriage pulling up outside the family home, and her heart leapt up into her throat. This was the man who had potentially wished her family harm, who had tried to destroy them all. And now she had invited him back inside. If it weren't for Yoon's wishes, then she never would have been able to do this. I shall go and introduce myself first once he has been brought inside by one of the staff members, Jonathan told her. Then I will bring him in. Ivy nodded, grateful to have this one man, who she had not met before, here. He had been good to her. She knew that if she ever managed to escape this situation, she would make more of an effort to spend time with him in the future. Ivy tried to position herself in the living room while she waited for Jonathan to come in with Duke Merrick. She did not know how she was supposed to look. If her father were around, he would have been able to give her some advice. But he was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life. Since this situation was new to Jonathan as well, he could not help her. She was alone. I cannot do this, Ivy told herself in a panic. I cannot make this work. But then she sucked in a couple of deep breaths, and found her steely determination once more. By the time Duke Merrick entered the room, Ivy had transformed herself into a picture of beauty and grace. Royce almost had his breath completely taken away by the mere sight of her. It is lovely to see you again, Lady Winters, he said in his most charming tone of voice. I am glad that you have invited me here to spend some time with you. We did not get off on the right foot beforehand. Ivy felt a redness staining her cheeks. Even though she had been through a terrible night, she was a little embarrassed about her behavior. She lashed out and reiterated rumors that she did not even know the truth of. She had acted as though Duke Merrick was guilty, which made it more difficult to see him today. It was just lucky that she did not think that anyone else had heard her. She needed to apologize, and it was best to do it now. I am terribly sorry. Royce waved his hands, stopping her in her tracks. Do not think anything of it. The night had gotten to us all. Your behavior was very much understandable. I believe that we should forget about it and start again." Ivy nodded gratefully. "Yes, thank you. I would like that too." Jonathan did not know exactly how he was supposed to behave. He hovered behind the pair as if he thought that he needed to watch their every single move. It made both Ivy and Royce very uncomfortable. They felt like they could not talk so freely, and that was obvious from the way they positioned their bodies. "So, you have been to see your father?" Royce did not know what else they could talk about. "I have." "He is?" Ivy felt herself getting a little choked up. "He is unconscious at the moment. I am very much hoping that he will come back around soon so we can find out the truth about what happened to him." She looked at Reyes out the corner of her eye. But he was not giving anything away yet. As challenging as it was, she needed to dig deeper. "Did you see him on the night of the party? Just before he collapsed, I mean?" It was a dangerous subject matter. It meant they might have to discuss the fact that at the time, she had decided she did not want to marry him. Ivy was not sure how she could avoid upsetting him. But she needed to know where he was at the time it happened. She looked up at him expectantly, waiting for his answer. "I did see him," Royce answered without flinching. "He was heading in my direction when he fell." Ivy drank this in, wondering if it was the truth. If so, then Reyes did not even know that she had rejected him in the first place. Unfortunately, it also meant that Royce did not have the motive that she assumed. On the face of it, this dispelled everything she had assumed. But since Ewan was not the culprit, it had to be someone. "Oh, I see." Ivy tried to choose her next words carefully. So she did not seem to be accusing him. "So, you saw him fall?" "I did not see anything until he was already on the floor and my brother had been arrested." "I did hear about your brother," Royce told her sadly. "It is such a shame." There was something in his tone that irritated Ivy. She felt she needed to say something. "It was not him," she shot back gruffly. "I know for a fact that he did not harm my father." "He would not." "No. I do not think that he would either." Royce shocked Ivy by answering calmly. "He does not seem like the sort of person who would do something like that. I spoke to him briefly. He is a wonderful boy." Ivy felt chastened. She kept acting rashly towards Royce and he was continually calm in return. He did not seem like a nasty, devious person. But then Mary had already told her about all of his financial problems, which she would not have suspected either. Duke Royce Merrick was certainly not who he appeared to be on the surface. He had deep, dark secrets that he was apparently very good at disguising. "Would you like to go for a walk around the gardens?" Ivy asked spontaneously. "It is a nice day." She glanced towards Jonathan, trying to check if this was acceptable to him. Thankfully, he did not seem to mind. "I think that I would like that very much, Lady Winters. I did not see the gardens before." As Ivy and Royce walked around the family gardens with Jonathan not too far behind them, she was careful to keep the conversation very light-hearted. So he would want to see her again. Hopefully this time at his own house. If he was not going to give her any clue as to what he saw on that night, then she needed to find some other clue. Maybe he would have something in his home that would help her work out what sort of man he was. It seemed that Ivy's plan had worked out when it was time for Royce to go, because he invited her to do just that. He invited her to come for a lunchtime meal at his home the following week, which she readily agreed to. She felt disappointed to not have her answer already, especially when it meant that her brother would have to spend even longer in that place. But at least she was working towards it. Ivy was one step closer to getting the answer that she needed to save her family. Once he was gone from her home, she felt a sense of relief. But before she could get too carried away, Ivy knew she needed to ask one more favor of Jonathan. She needed to ask him to accompany her to Duke Merrick's home the following week. She could not go by herself. She needed him. Chapter 8. The week had dragged on painfully for Ivy as she waited to see Duke Merrick again. She had written to, and been to visit, her brother the one time in his tiny little jail cell. And she had taken a trip to the hospital every single day. 2. Nothing had changed for her father or her brother. They were both at a standstill. And so was Ivy until she made this next step. Because of that, she was more determined than ever to make today count. They could not carry on this way. There was no way that she could stand one more week of waiting. It would destroy her. "How do you feel about today?" Jonathan asked her as he took his place in the carriage. "Do you think this is the man that you would like to officially court?" "Oh, I do not know." Ivy felt a little taken aback. She had not yet told Jonathan about her suspicions. And she did not think it a good idea to do so. Much as she trusted him, this might have pushed him too far. "I suppose I am working that out." Ivy felt terrible for not being truthful with someone who had been nothing but kind-hearted to her. Jonathan assumed that he was helping her not only with her family but also with finding a husband, when really, she was manipulating him. Still, Ivy assumed that he would still help her if he knew what she was trying to do. She did not want to involve too many people in the danger. The carriage moved along the road, bumping over the cobblestone as it went, and Ivy used the time to gaze out of the window. To an outsider, she looked like she was admiring the view, looking at the houses, watching London going past. But Ivy's eyes were blurry, and she was completely lost in her thoughts. "I do not know what I am looking for," she thought to herself. "But I absolutely need to find it. Maybe it would be some evidence of poison. Something that showed he could harm someone else. That would be enough for her to at least start fighting the case that Ewan had done nothing wrong." Ivy knew that freeing Ewan was her first priority. Getting the true culprit into trouble could come afterward. By the time the carriage had traveled all the way to Royce's home, she felt like she was ready. As long as she did not get distracted by anything, she knew that she would find whatever it was that she needed. The large, impressive townhouse that towered above Ivy contained answers, if there was anything to find. Jonathan took her arm and helped Ivy from the carriage and walked with her towards the front door. He took control and knocked on the large wooden frame, alerting the people inside to their presence. The door swung open quickly, almost as if someone was standing behind it waiting, not leaving any time for panic. "Good morning." The tall butler greeted them. "Oh, good morning." Jonathan stepped in quickly. "We have an appointment with Duke Merrick. My name is Mr. Jonathan Winters, and this is Lady Ivy Winters." The butler bowed his head down. "If you would like to wait here." He indicated towards the reception area just inside the door. "I shall alert Duke Merrick to your presence." Ivy and Jonathan waited in a horrible silence that seemed to cling thickly to the air. It felt like forever for Royce to come, but as soon as he arrived, he smiled brightly at Ivy. For a second, she was reminded of the very first moment that she met him when she was impressed with his very handsome face. If she forgot about everything that had happened to this man, she could feel a slight churning sensation in the pit of her stomach. It was like butterflies were flapping inside of her. "Do not get distracted," she reminded herself. "Remember that he is arrogant and also dangerous. Please, come in, Mr. and Lady Winters," Royce said, inviting the pair of them to follow him. "It is wonderful to see you both again as always." They walked into the dining room where cups of tea were already sitting there waiting for them. Each took a seat, and sipped their drinks simultaneously. Ivy watched Royce over the top of her cup as she drank, trying to see what his mood was. He seemed to be very happy today, and she had a feeling it was because of her. He seemed to like her a lot. Maybe she would be flattered by that if Royce admiring her had not put her family in danger. It was potentially his feelings that had caused all of this. "How has your week been?" Royce asked Ivy kindly. "Have there been any improvements with your family?" "Everything is still very much the same," Ivy replied tautly. "My father is still unconscious, and my brother is still locked away. They are both in the same condition as they were last week." Royce's face fell. He seemed to be genuinely upset by the news. Was this because he wanted her father to get better or because he wanted him to die? The idea that anyone could want her father to pass away really upset Ivy. "Oh, that is terrible news," he said to Ivy softly. "I do hope that things get better soon." Ivy glanced towards the kitchen, wondering if any poison would be stored in there. But she already knew that she did not have any chance of getting in there unseen. Not with the number of staff that Royce had working for him. There would always be people around. He would probably not keep it there anyway because it would be better for few people to know the truth about him. Maybe it would be kept in the bathroom instead. Or his bedroom. If that was the case, then she really needed to get some time alone at some point. Royce moved his arm across the table and accidentally knocked a red leather-bound book to the ground. "Oh, my schedule," he said with a chuckle. "I will go and put that somewhere safe. It has all of my important information in." He raised his eyebrows knowingly. "I cannot lose this or I lose everything." Ivy watched the book with wide eyes. Maybe that was what she needed, Royce's journal. If it contained everything, then maybe it would have some evidence of what he'd done. If she could not find anything else out, then she at least needed that. Who knew what it would contain? It was a long shot, but there was a chance. She could not take her eyes off of it as he took it across the room and into the hallway. He was not gone long. So Ivy knew that was where it had been left. She simply needed to get away for long enough to grab hold of it. And then she would have to leave quickly before he discovered that his book was missing. She knew it would not take long for him to spot it gone, but hopefully, by then, she would have what she needed. If she could get the evidence to the police quickly enough, then there would not be anything that he could do to her. "Ah, wonderful," Royce declared with a flourish as maids filled the room. "Here is our lunch." Ivy had to try and be patient as the staff at the Merrick household spread food across the table for the three of them to eat. The ravenous look in Jonathan's eyes was enough to remind Ivy how hungry she was. She had not felt well enough to eat her breakfast when she had first got dressed this morning, and that had come back to punish her now. Underneath her tightly wound corset, her stomach grumbled desperately. "This all looks lovely," she said quickly, scanning her eyes over the bread, cheese, and meat feast. "Thank you so much, Duke Merrick. It is very kind of you to invite me and my chaperone over here." Royce gave Ivy a very loving smile. In his eyes, things were finally going his way and he could see Lady Winters warming up to him. The more time he spent with her, the more her icy exterior thawed. Eventually, he felt he would get to see the real her. The version of Ivy that she hid away from the rest of the world. And he could not wait. He liked her a lot more than he thought he ever would. "You are both always welcome in my home," he told them seriously. "Anytime." "How is business?" Jonathan asked, excited to learn more about Duke Merrick, as it felt like it was his role to do so. "You work in shipping and trading, do you not?" Ivy took a few silent bites as the men talked. Her brain buzzed so loudly with the knowledge of what she had to do next, that she could barely hear what was being said. She had learned not to comment upon Royce's business anyway from the last time that they had spoken. So she presumed her silence was welcomed. Eventually, with her heart pounding in her ears, Ivy scraped her chair back and rose from the table. It would not be seen as a positive way to behave, her leaving the table in the middle of a meal. But this might be the only chance she had, and Ivy was far more aware that she could not afford to blow it. "Excuse me," she muttered, almost under her breath. I just need to use the facilities. I shall be back. Neither of the men even looked her way. They were so engrossed in talking to one another. So Ivy slipped out of the room, and made her way to the hallway. There she spotted it, sitting on one of the tables in plain view. Ivy raced to it with a surge of hope bursting from her chest. She was never brought up this way. She did not even want to think about what her father might think of her for stealing. She simply had to do it. Her hands clutched around the book, and she flicked it open to a random page, just to check. To her surprise, Ivy found the page was filled with writing. It seemed to be much more of a diary than simply a way for Royce to keep ahead of his schedule. This only confirmed to Ivy that she was doing the right thing. It was very likely that she would find something in here. If it were the place where Royce wrote down everything that was important to him, then surely there would at least be some hint. If not the crime entirely laid out. She lifted up the skirts of her dress and tucked the book into the oversized stockings that she had worn purposefully. Now, all she needed to do was get through the rest of this meal and escape before Royce noticed it was missing. That would not be too hard, would it?
If you like our channel, please subscribe and make sure to click on the bell icon, so that you won't miss any future audiobooks we'll upload for free each week on YouTube.
Chapter 9. August 25, 1831. Many people assume that I have had my life handed to me on a plate, that I have been given everything that I have, and that I have not had to work hard for any of it. But they could not be more wrong. No one knows that I have not always lived in London, and that I had to move to the capital city because my father lost everything. He made some terrible investments and destroyed the wonderful life that he had created for himself. Those decisions ultimately killed my mother and my sister, as we could not afford the medical treatment when they both came down with the plague. That was the moment when I knew I wanted to do better. I left our home and I came to the capital to make something better for myself and the family that I have left, and that is what I have done. I did not have much when I arrived, but I have managed to turn it into a business, and now I am a well-respected man. I simply dislike it when people assume that I have had everything handed to me. November 3, 1831. Throughout my work I have started to realize something important. I would like to help people who do not have as much as I do. Some of what I have earned has been through hard work and some has been luck. That is luck which I would like to share. I help out my father and other siblings by sending them money whenever they need it. But there are other people in the same city in which I live that need assistance too. I want to help them. I have seen firsthand how a few bad decisions and poor choices can be destructive to people's lives, and I would not like any other deaths to be because of that. I am not quite sure what I shall do, but I will do something. February 1, 1832. I feel like I am making some wonderful progress with my work. I am very happy with what I have achieved. People are not always willing to accept my help at first. There are times when pride gets in the way, but I always manage to win out in the end. It is an incredible feeling. I would like to make others understand that. If more men in my position, with privilege and money, helped out the needy, then the world would be a better place. Maybe that is me being idealistic, perhaps I am viewing a world that will never exist, but it is nice to consider. February 16, 1832. I have been invited to the coming out party of a local lady. Her name is Lady Ivy Winters. I have been invited to previous events such as this one. I suppose my reputation makes me an eligible bachelor. But this is the first one that I have actually considered seriously. I suppose at my age of 25 years old, it is time to consider settling down with a woman and starting a family. I have always been so busy with my career that I have not had time to consider the other side of my life. But now it might be time. It might really be time for love. I do not know anything about this Lady Ivy Winters. Maybe I will find out some things before I meet her. Maybe not. Either way, I have a feeling that meeting her will change a lot for me. It will set me on the path to marriage. February 28, 1832. Last night was the best and worst night of my entire life. I do not even know what to think about any of it. The moment I laid eyes on Lady Ivy Winters, I felt something shift in my chest. I was expecting meeting her to be monumental for me. But I did not know how much. I did not know that I would feel like I was tumbling, uncontrollably falling into very deep feelings. She is a beautiful woman. The most beautiful that I have ever seen in my life. I love her buttery-colored hair, her deep eyes, the confidence that flows from her. I was immediately captivated by her, and all I wanted to do was know more about this lovely, mysterious woman. I am not sure that I made such a good impression myself. I believe that I went so overboard in trying to impress Lady Winters that I put her off me completely. She did not look too happy as she walked away from me. I wanted to find a way to make that right. I wanted to speak to Lady Winters again. But before I got the chance to do so, the wonderful Lord Winters collapsed and everything changed. I do not know what happened, but it was a very tragic thing. Medical professionals had to come and take him away. It was a real shame. I truly do hope that he is not too ill, because from the short conversation that I had with him, I liked him a lot. I did get another chance to speak to Lady Winters afterwards, but she was understandably too upset to speak to me. She lashed out and took her temper out on me. Of course, I cannot blame her for that. I felt the same anger and frustration when my mother was ill. She did say some very strange things to me about me losing my fortune through gambling, which of course is not the case since I help gambling addicts myself. But again, I can let it go because I know that she is hurting. I would do anything to take that agonizing pain away from her. I do not know if I shall ever be given the chance to speak to her again, but I would love nothing more than to help her too. Ivy felt tears bubbling behind her eyes as she read the shocking words in Duke Merrick's journal. There were hundreds of entries within the pages, but she stopped only on the ones that seemed to speak to her, such as the ones which explained why he had been so prickly with her when she discussed his business. The ones that showed how much of a good man that he was. And of course the ones that talked about her. She slumped back onto her bed once she had finished reading the entries surrounding that night. Judging by the very private information written inside the pages, if he had done something, then it would be written in here. And it was not. He had not written anything to suggest that he would be guilty at all. If anything, Duke Royce Merrick was far too kind and lovely a man who would never do anything to hurt another man. He used his wealth to help the less fortunate when his family experienced their own issues, which made him a very impressive man. Ivy felt blown away. The fact that everything she thought about him was wrong shocked her. Even the idea that he was arrogant was not the truth. He had simply been trying to impress her because he liked her. He liked her a lot. Judging by the words that he had written about her, he thought very highly of her. The butterflies that she felt when she looked at Royce flapped violently in her stomach once more. He likes me, she thought to herself while clutching her stomach tightly. And I have stolen his journal. The fact that she had taken such a bold mood when she was wrong scared her. Now, Ivy had no idea what was going to happen. Royce would be angry, of course. This would lead to him yelling at her and she would have to take it because she knew that he deserved it. But that was not the only consequence of her mistake. The fact that Royce did not harm her father meant that she had been focusing on the wrong person and that whoever did do it was still out there and her brother would still be rotting in jail. She had wasted time. And now she did not know where to turn. Ivy had become so convinced that it was him, that she did not even bother to worry about the other people surrounding her father. Now, she was going to have to start from scratch. Ivy wanted to scream. She wanted to yell and thrash and really fall apart. But she could not. Not when all of this mess was her doing. She needed to remain strong and to work out her next plan of action. Despite knowing that, she could not stop the wetness from flooding her cheeks as she thought about the hopelessness of Ewan's situation. The longer that he spent in jail, the worse things became, and it was starting to become less and less likely that he would get out. Not unless their father woke up, which was also unlikely. Lady Winters? She pushed herself up instantly and wiped away the tears as Charlotte, one of the handmaidens, grabbed her attention. I am sorry to disturb you so late in the afternoon, but you have a visitor. Is it Mary? Lady Turner? Ivy replied, desperately hoping that it was going to be. Again, she found herself really needing the advice of her much wiser friend. Mary would know what to do. She always did. No. It is not. Ivy gave Charlotte a confused look. It is actually a gentleman. I believe it is the one that you have been to see earlier on in the day. Upon seeing Ivy's shocked and horror-filled face, Charlotte immediately offered her a solution. I can let him know that you are not ready to receive visitors if you would prefer. Ivy knew that turning Royce away would not end well for either of them. So even though she was nowhere near ready for this conversation just yet, she knew that she had to tackle it. She had done something wrong. She needed to face the consequences of that. Ivy had to face this head-on. It is fine. She forced a weak smile on her lips. I shall see him now. Please take him to the drawing room. Is Jonathan still here? Charlotte nodded. Please ask him to meet us there too. Would you like refreshments brought to you? Charlotte felt unsure. This did not feel right. No. I do not think that Duke Merrick will be here long enough for that. Thank you very much. Ivy sucked in a couple of deep and calming breaths, trying to cool the burning hot panic that circled through her body. Once Charlotte left her room, Ivy took the book and she closed it up, preparing herself to give it back to Royce, while facing his potential temper at the same time. He is a good man, she told herself. A kind man who wants to help people. Maybe he will be good to me, too. But the fact that she had stolen from him and invaded his privacy, the fact that she had read his private thoughts and she now knew how he felt about her, complicated things. Ivy was not sure that she could talk herself out of that at all. She did not think that she would be as forgiving if she wrote down her thoughts, and someone had stolen that from her. Ivy knew that her rage would get the better of her and she would lose it. With a heavy heart and a sinking feeling in her chest, Ivy turned and made her way down the stairs, to where Duke Merrick would now be waiting for her in the drawing room. She had asked Charlotte to take him there, so they could have this talk. It did not matter that she knew that he was not dangerous. Ivy was still very afraid. And not just about him. It was time for Jonathan to learn the truth. Chapter 10. Royce paced up and down the drawing room in the Winters household, trying to work out what on earth had happened. As far as he had known, things were going really well between himself and Ivy after their initial fallouts, so he could not understand why she would steal his very important journal from him. He knew that she had done it as well, because she had seen where he had taken the book. And if he really thought about it, it was not long before she went that way herself. At that moment, he had been so involved in a business conversation with Jonathan that he barely noticed her leaving. He had, however, spotted the change within her when she returned to the table afterward. It was obvious that she had done something wrong, and now he knew what. When Ivy made an excuse that she was not well and needed to leave early, he actually felt sorry for her. He thought that she looked sickly in her face, so he had absolutely no reason to believe that she was lying. But she had lied to him, and she had lied so that she could steal from him. Lady Ivy Winters was not the woman he thought she was. His judgment when it came to her was very wrong. He had been blinded by her beauty and the way that she made him feel. He would not make that mistake again. Once he got his journal back, he would be much more cautious with his heart to ensure that he did not get fooled again. Is this something that I can help you with? Jonathan asked curiously. He had only stayed behind for a while, so he could get some letters written. But now he was glad. Because this could have been terrible if it had happened without him. No. Royce replied stiffly. I need to talk to Lady Winters. Preferably alone. He knew that way he would get a more honest answer, but he also knew that would not happen. Eventually, he heard her footsteps before he saw her. He could tell that those dainty, fairly quiet feet were Ivy's. So he turned his body around to face the door so that he was staring at her the moment that she came inside. Royce attempted to remain steely as Ivy slipped into the room, but the mere sight of him made her waver once more. He really did adore the way that she looked and the fire that he could see behind her gaze. It did not make it easy for him to remain strong when his heart so desperately wanted to let all of that go. I am sorry. Ivy decided immediately to address the issue and hand the book over. I did not mean for this to happen. I did not want to hurt you with my actions. I am very sorry for any trouble that I have caused. What is happening here? Jonathan asked, confused. But neither Ivy or Royce acknowledged him. Oh. Royce took the journal from Ivy, wondering what would happen next. Well, thank you. He tilted his head towards her and stared into Ivy's eyes. His pulse sped up dramatically as did hers. There was something powerful sizzling between them. But neither of them knew how to address it. Why? Why did you take it? Royce finally asked, while forcing himself to break the eye contact. Ivy sighed loudly before she finally opened up and told Royce the truth. I took it because I was afraid that you were the one who hurt my father. She could barely even look at him. I know that someone other than my brother has done this to him. And I needed to find out who before you and is charged with the crime. Jonathan parted his lips, wanting to speak out to find out more about what was slowly becoming an extremely confusing situation. But unfortunately, he did not get a chance to speak. Royce could not believe what he was hearing. This completely blew him away. You thought that it was me? He actually took a step backward as the shock raced through him. Why would you think that? Ivy squeezed her eyes closed, trying to keep the tears of shame inside. She had cried enough over this situation, she did not deserve to cry again. I had just told my father to reject you if you asked to spend more time with me. I did not get a good first impression of you. And I did not want to continue with that. Oh. Royce felt like he had been thumped in the stomach. That admission hurt him. I see. I did not know you then. Ivy insisted, needing to explain herself. I am ashamed to say that I childishly did not see any reason to give you a chance. That is something that I deeply regret now. Royce shook his head, trying not to get caught up in the pain he felt inside. That crushed him, but there were more pressing issues here. But why does that mean you believe I would hurt your father? Ivy hated herself for having to continue with this conversation, but she started and had to finish. My friend had told me that there were rumors about you. That you had gambled away all of your money and that you needed a wife with a dowry. I guess in the heat of the moment, I jumped that up one step further in my mind. And I thought that you might want revenge on my father because of my rejection. Ivy did not like how arrogant she sounded as she said that. It did not make her sound like a nice person at all. It would now seem that she thought herself so important, so desirable, that someone would be so desperate to marry her that they would go to such lengths. She felt foolish, and again blamed herself for everything. I am terribly sorry. I can see now how bad that is. I understand if you never want to speak to me again. I do want to continue speaking to you. Royce surprised her by saying, I am not offended by your assumption. He held up the journal to her. If you have read any of this, you will know that I am used to being judged. People in London have spent my entire time here assuming things about me. Instinctively, Ivy reached out and touched Royce's arm in a comforting gesture.
That does not make it right.
Royce could feel something sizzling under his skin.
It was a powerful sensation that he had never experienced before.
It made him feel unsteady on his feet. It was challenging for him to remain standing upright.
No, he murmured.
That does not make it right, but it is the path that I have chosen for myself. Ivy felt the connection between them building even deeper. Despite everything that had happened, she could feel herself getting sucked in by him. There was a strange sensation in her heart. Neediness that was crying out for something. She was almost compelled to raise herself up onto her tiptoes so that she could kiss him. Her lips yearned to press against his to feel how powerful these sparks could go. But luckily, she managed to stop herself at the very last moment. She could not act in that way. It was not right. It would ruin her. He would think she was easy and that would bring shame to her family. And that family name had already been spoiled by everything that had happened. She could not make it worse. So, what are we going to do? Royce asked Ivy decisively. How are we going to solve this? We? Ivy asked him curiously while giving him a strange look.
What do you mean, we?
I am not going to let you go through this by yourself. Am I?
Royce replied as if it was obvious.
It is a terrible situation that you find yourself in. And I believe with my help we can solve it quicker.
Yes. Of course.
Jonathan finally got some words out.
I do not know exactly what is happening here, but it involves my family. So I would like to help as well. It was the lifeline that Ivy wished for. But that she never thought that she would get.
Two men with resources and connections were offering to be on her side.
Which meant she would get her answers faster. It is for Ewan, she reminded herself. For Ewan and my father.
I can face anything for them.
I do not know, she admitted. I have not thought too far ahead.
I guess I got caught up in thinking it was you.
I have not planned what I am going to do afterwards. But I cannot leave my brother in prison.
Royce bristled. Still not enjoying the feeling that anyone could think that he was capable of something so terrible. He knew that if he allowed himself to really think about it, the hurt would last forever. But he could not. Ivy only wanted to help her family. That was something that he could understand. And he would help her.
We need to look into your father's business, he told her decisively.
We need to discover if there is anything there which might make someone dislike him. We also need to work out the names of everyone at your party, so that we can combine both lists. We also need to see if your father has any dark secrets that he is hiding.
He does not, Ivy insisted rapidly. He is not that sort of person. He would not do that. Yes,
I thought that about my father, too. But it turned out that I was wrong.
Royce did not enjoy dishing out the tough love. But if Ivy wanted to delve into this, then she needed to do so with an open mind. She might go on to learn things that she did not like. And Royce felt responsible.
He wanted her to be prepared. Sometimes, people do things for their family that is not always right. But at the time they do not see any other way. Ivy's chest felt tight as she considered that prospect. Maybe her father did have secrets. Maybe the foundation that her life had been built upon was about to be ripped away. He had done everything on his own. Perhaps he had been forced to do things that he did not agree with just to keep his family afloat. She could not judge him for making choices under pressure. Either way, she needed to know. She had to face the truth. She glanced towards Jonathan to see what he thought about it all. But all he did was nod in agreement.
I am ready.
She tried to sound serious as she said this. Ivy could almost feel the color draining from her face. I'm ready to find out whatever it is. I need to know so that I can help my family.
Of course.
The best thing that could happen would be your father waking up.
Royce murmured,
almost to himself as he thought things through. He might know something that could really help us with this. He has not made any sign of waking up yet,
but I do hope that he does soon.
Ivy and Royce stared at one another for a few moments, emotions swirling around them. Part of Ivy was keen to get started, to find out what was going on immediately, but another bit of her wanted to hold off. Ignorance had been bliss, so far. She wanted to cling on to that for a little while longer. So, I believe it is late now, Royce declared with a sharp nod. I should go back home.
But I shall return in the morning,
with a better plan in mind, and we will get started unlocking all the secrets that might give us a clue. He tapped the journal in his hand as he thought, which made Ivy feel terribly guilty. Royce had not even asked her about what she had read within those pages, and that included the information that she had seen about herself. He truly was a wonderful man with a kind heart. Maybe if he had not gone out of his way to impress her at the party, and he had shown her his true self, then she would have fallen head over heels in an instant. It would not have stopped everything from happening, but at least Ivy would have some direction in her life. Now, she was not sure how she could feel. She certainly felt something for Royce, but that would have to be pushed to the back of her mind. Maybe even forever, if he decided not to forgive her in the end. Chapter 11. Ivy blew out a deep breath of air as she glanced around at all the paperwork that she, Jonathan, and Royce had scattered over the floor as they researched. When they first started with this, she felt terrible as they rifled through her father's private documents, but it soon became clear that he had nothing that he would be angry at her for reading. It was all very professional stuff. Ivy hoped that her father would understand why she felt this necessary. I do not think that we are going to find anything, do you? She asked Royce helplessly. I did hope that we were going to find some sort of clue that your father had been involved in dodgy dealings. Not because I wanted you to discover anything bad, but just because it would make things easier. But we have not. Royce sighed loudly, disappointment crushing him, too. Is there any other reason that he might not be liked? Can you think of anything that could potentially be more than you first thought? Ivy paced around the room as she desperately racked her brain. She had never paid much attention to anything that her father did inside the home. But maybe she had subconsciously picked up on something. But nothing immediately came to mind. Her brain remained frustratingly blank. It was like a big deep hole. I cannot think of anything. My father has always been a fun, well-liked man. Why would this happen? Yes, Jonathan interjected. I have only heard good things about him, too. I might not know him well, but I do not imagine him doing anything terrible. Royce felt hopeless. He had not figured that it would be so hard. He supposed that he could see how Ivy got herself so focused on him for the blame. Today, he had a one-track mind with the idea that he was going to find something untoward happening. And it was crushing to discover that he was wrong. What can we do now? Ivy asked, needing an answer from Royce. What is our next step? Royce took Lord Winter's chair and rested his head in his hands. We cannot let it go. He did not want Ivy to think that he was giving up. There must be something. Maybe we should look somewhere else. Ivy could feel the tension rolling off Royce in waves. The stress balled up on his shoulders and there was a tautness to his neck. This was stressing him out. Possibly even more than it was her. She was so grateful to him. He was far nicer than anyone she had ever met in her life. It was lucky that he wanted to help. She just wished that they had actually found something. Neither of them wanted to end up empty-handed. We could look through the bookshelf? She asked helplessly. I read something once about people hiding their most important documents in the pages of their favorite books. Is it worth a try? At first, The look that Royce gave her was one that made her shrink into herself. She felt foolish and embarrassed, knowing that she should not have said anything so silly. But then his expression softened.
Yes. I think you might be right. It is not anything that I have done myself. But we should try.
Ivy nodded slowly and bent down to pick up the paperwork. They had to tidy up everything in the office before they left, so they were not being disrespectful. It seemed that Royce had the same idea, because he bent down, too, and their hands reached out for the same piece of paper at exactly the same time. Their skin instantly brushed together. It was electrifying. Ivy felt all the air zap from her body completely, leaving her dizzy. Her eyes attempted to focus on Royce, but everything was blurry. She became a ball of feelings. Ivy needed to find the words to break the thick tension surrounding the moment. Royce could feel the same magnetic pull as Ivy. His lips twitched with need. Despite everything that was going on around them, all he wanted to do was press his lips against hers. If Jonathan were not in the room and it wouldn't embarrass him for being too forward, he might well have done it. He might have caved into the temptation and simply kissed her. His lips tingled and sensed Ivy's did, too. The urge to break one of polite society's biggest rules was intense. "I will show you to the library," Ivy finally managed to rasp out. "We can. Take a look now." They dragged their eyes away from one another and gathered up everything rapidly. Ivy and Royce were equally churned up by feelings that they did not know what to do with. If things were normal, and they were simply courting one another, Royce would use this time to make it clear that he wanted to take things further. But they were not. None of this was normal. Maybe they would not know how strong their feelings for one another were anyway because they would not be in such an intense situation. The tension of being by themselves was certainly making everything so much harder to hide. It practically consumed them both. The butterflies that Ivy felt whenever she looked at Royce grew larger until they were almost the size of birds. The sensations made her corset feel too tight. There was a deep urge to tear it from her body completely. Her heart thumped violently. The inside of her mouth felt bone dry. Somehow, she had a feeling that all of these physical symptoms meant that she was falling head over heels in love. In just a few short days, she had fallen for the man whose arrogance had immediately repulsed her. It was a very strange world of feelings. For a brief moment, Ivy wondered what Mary would say if she told her about the complete change in her feelings. But she instantly dismissed that idea. She had more important things to worry about first. Once the office looked exactly the same as it had before Ivy, Jonathan, and Royce had entered. They left and made their way to the library. As they walked through the house, Ivy could feel the eyes of the staff upon them. They would not make any comment, which simply was not done. But she could not bring herself to look any of them in the eye anyway. She could not stand the idea of being judged for her behavior. Ivy also worried that the way she felt about Royce was written all over her face. And no one could know how close they kept coming to kissing. If Jonathan were not with them, there was no telling how different things would be. Ivy stepped into the family library and inhaled deeply, loving the smell of the books. This was where she felt most at home. And this room was her favorite place in the whole world. If everything else was not happening, she would probably be in here, wasting the day away as she lost herself in a story. She missed her favorite pastime. She had not had time to read for what felt like forever. She could not wait to get back to it. Right. Royce glanced around the room. "Let us take a look through the books. Just in case." He was not convinced that this was the answer. But since he did not have any solutions of his own to offer, this was what they were going to do. Ivy knew her father much better than Royce did. And if he was anything like her, then maybe he loved these books. And there was a chance that she was right. He wanted to support her anyway. They both needed her to be right. If not, neither of them knew what to do. What other options were there? Ivy felt acutely aware of every inch of Royce's body as they moved around the room to look through the books. She could barely focus on what she was supposed to be doing because the skin on her body was prickling so painfully. Everything in her body cried out for him to just touch her. She wanted to feel that delicious sensation all over again. Ivy knew that if Reyes scooped her up in his arm right now, he would allow him to do so. What is wrong with me? She thought angrily to herself. Why am I feeling this way when my family is in so much danger? Why am I even thinking about Duke Merrick? It is so very wrong. But she could not stop herself. It did not matter how much she tried to shut off her emotions. They remained firmly there, all the same, tormenting her. Every time she tried to keep her eyes fixed forward, they kept sidelining towards Royce anyway. His handsome face kept drawing her back in. The feeling that she wanted to kiss him kept tingling on her lips. It was becoming impossible to ignore. I think that we should go to the hospital, Royce eventually said spontaneously. I know that there has been no change with regards to your father. But maybe the doctors have some more information now. I have asked them every single day and have not been given anything as yet. I know, Royce said. But we cannot give up hope. Can we? If he really has been poisoned by someone, we have to hold out hope that he will wake up and give us some answers. We also need to see if we can bring him home yet. Yes, she answered in a subdued tone of voice as she slid the book back onto the shelf. You are right. We should go and see him. I do not want to give up hope. Did you want to wait until tomorrow? Or would you prefer to go right now? Oh, right now. Ivy nodded enthusiastically. If we can find anything out, I would like to know right now. Then it is very lucky that I have the carriage waiting outside. Ivy felt a skip in her chest as she considered the idea of sitting in a carriage with Duke Merrick, even if they would not be alone. Even with Jonathan there, it would feel incredibly intense. It is not about that. She scolded herself again. It is about seeing my father. Nothing more. Yes, that sounds wonderful. She gulped down a thick ball of emotion that stuck in her throat. Thank you very much, Duke Merrick. I appreciate everything that you are doing for me and my family. You are very welcome. For you, I do not mind. As those words came out of his mouth, he wondered if he had said too much. But the way that Ivy's face lifted made him very happy. He hoped that it was all going to be all right. Chapter 12. We would like to see Lord Winters, Royce declared with determination as they stepped into the hospital. During the carriage ride from Ivy's home he had grown increasingly concerned that he might have overstated his ability to get information from the doctors, and now felt like he had something to prove. This is his daughter. Oh, yes, I know. The nurse's face broke into a big friendly smile as she saw them in front of her. I recognize her face well. She has been here almost every single day. How are you, Lady Winters? I'm good, thank you. Ivy replied politely. I would like to see how my father is doing today. Ivy braced herself, waiting for the standard answer that she always got. Hearing that there had been no change was a blessing at first. But now it felt so much more like a curse. She needed him to get better. I am terribly glad that you have come today, the nurse replied. We were going to write you a letter. Ivy's entire body jolted violently. She did not know what this meant. But it was different. She stared deeply into the nurse's eyes, trying to work out if that was a good or a bad thing. If it were bad news, then it would have to be the worst news. That would leave her with nothing. No father and no way to help her brother. What has happened? She gushed desperately. Is he?
She could not finish that sentence. He is awake. Those words hit Ivy hard, like a thump in the chest. But in a wonderful way. And talking. Ivy's knees buckled. She almost fell to the floor with relief. Royce wrapped his arms around her, instinctively knowing that she no longer had the ability to stand. And he stopped her from collapsing under the weight of this wonderful news. He felt a powerful surge of hope, too. The fact that Lord Winters had not lost his life was fantastic. No one wanted him to die. And it also meant that they could save Ewan, too. It would all be all right. He is awake? Jonathan asked in disbelief. Truly awake? He gave Ivy and Royce a look. This was wonderful news. And news that none of them were truly expecting. That is wonderful. May we go and see him? Royce asked, knowing that Ivy could not speak. Is he all right for visitors? He will be very excited to see you, Lady Winters. He has asked about you and your brother already. Ivy's heart sunk. The only downside to that remark was that her father was not aware of what had happened to Ewan. She would have to explain. All the while he was stuck in a hospital bed. Which would upset him greatly. Still, this was the first step in a very positive direction. They could all be saved now. She actually had a chance of getting her family back. Which was the most wonderful news of all. It was all that she wanted. Please. She gasped. Please take me to him. I really want to see my father. I need to see him myself. Royce continued to hold on to Ivy as they walked through the hospital. And he did not let her go even as they entered the hospital room of Lord Winters. He was afraid that the second he took his arms from her, she would fall to the ground in a heap. Which would very much humiliate her and ruin her lovely dress. Oh, father! Ivy almost screamed as she saw life in her father's eyes. Finally, he was awake. Even hearing the news that his eyes had opened was not enough. She needed to see it for herself. Why you are well again. Ivy let go of Royce and raced over to her father and wrapped her arms around his neck. He felt warmer today than the last time she had touched him. She could almost feel the blood pumping through his body. Now that he was awake, she could admit to herself that she never thought this would happen. She had resigned to herself that her father was going to die. Not that she wanted to accept it herself. Heat filled her body as she held her father and tears of relief fell down her cheeks. She was elated, happy. Over the moon with joy. Her father did not look as healthy as he normally did. But that did not matter. He was alive, and for that, she would always be grateful. Thank goodness Royce had persuaded her to come. How are you feeling? She asked as she pulled back to look at him. You have had me so worried. I think I am all right. Her father replied with teasing, but raspy tone. I have felt better before though. Ivy giggled and used her handkerchief to wipe away her happy tears. That is such wonderful news. How are you? It has been a while. Has it not? What has happened? Ivy looked down, anxiety flooded her as she had to get the truth out now. Do you know about Ewan? I have not seen him. He has not come to visit me yet. I suppose he must be busy. He is in jail. Ivy blurted it out rapidly. He has been blamed for poisoning you. Poison. Lord Winters tried to pull himself into more of a sitting position. But he could not. The bed sheets were tight around his body. What do you mean? I was not poisoned. What would make you think that? Neither Royce nor Jonathan felt like this was their conversation to have. So they remained with their backs against the wall, allowing Ivy the chance to speak to her father. But it was challenging when he made such a comment. Luckily, Ivy seemed to be thinking exactly the same thing as him because she asked the question he so desperately wanted to. If you were not poisoned, then what happened? Why did you collapse in the middle of the party? Color tinged Lord Winter's cheeks as he thought about that. He had been told as much by the medical staff, but to hear the same story from his own child made it worse. Making health problems public was not an acceptable way to behave. Of course, he had not been able to help it. The sickness felt like it came out of nowhere. But that did not make it any better. He should have taken himself into another room entirely. My heart has been giving me troubles for a while, he finally told Ivy. It was my heart on that night. That did not make Ivy feel any better. Knowing that her father had an ongoing health problem was not comforting at all. Especially if it made him sick at public events. That is terrible. I shall be fine, do not worry about me. Lord Winters did not want to get into it. He had managed to keep any issues at bay for a long time. And knew he could continue. We need to clear up this mess with your brother. Ivy heard the determination in her father's voice. Even now after he had been ill. His main priority was his children. This made her realize what a tight-knit family they were. Always prioritizing one another. She felt lucky. But, before they could concentrate on freeing Ewan, she had to check to be sure. Are you absolutely certain that you were not poisoned? There was not any food or drink that you consumed just before you collapsed. We need to be sure of what happened before we talk to the police. I did not eat or drink anything. Lord Winters was sure. There is nothing wrong with my memory. I can recall every single detail of that night. I was on my way to find. His words trailed off as it suddenly hit him who was standing behind his daughter. The very same man that she had insisted she did not like. It is all right, father. Ivy insisted. I have told Duke Merrick everything. He knows that you were looking for him. She smiled at Royce before continuing. I actually believed that it was him who harmed you. Lord Winters laughed at his daughter and her dramatic reaction. To him, it felt obvious that it was simply sickness that had claimed him. Why did you believe that anyone harmed me? That is what they said. The people who took you away. Ivy narrowed her eyes as she tried to remember. Or maybe someone told me that was why Ewan was arrested. Either way, that is what I was told. Lord Winter's expression hardened. Well, that is wrong, and I need to get out of here to make it right. I need to get to the police station and get Ewan out of there. He will not do well in prison. No, you are right. Ivy nodded and kept her head low. He is not doing well. We do need to get him out of there before anything bad happens to him. I fear that he will not survive it much longer. Me and Jonathan have been trying to help. Jonathan, your cousin? Lord Winters was shocked. He has been helping you? He has. Ivy smiled. And he has been wonderful. I know that we are not close to the extended family. But I feel like we should be. Oh, I agree. But before we worry about that, we must sort out Ewan. After which, I will thank Jonathan properly. You do not have to do that, Jonathan said. But again he found himself talked over. So, we must leave. We must go now. We need to get him out now that I can clear it up. Can you leave yet? Royce jumped in, not wanting Lord Winters to harm himself further. He did not look well enough to go yet. Should we check with the doctors first that you are fit and well to leave? I feel just fine. I shall order a doctor to come and see me at home to check on me. I want to leave. Ivy gave Royce a pleading look, begging him for help with her eyes, and immediately he crumbled. He already knew that there was nothing he would not do for Lady Winters. If she wanted him to help get her father out of here, then he would. He would simply have to ensure that they kept an eye on him. Do you know of any reason why the police would immediately suspect your son? He asked, biding for a little bit more time.
Is there any reason why they would arrest him first of all? It seems to be a very snap decision, especially as it turns out you were not poisoned after all.
That leaves me a little concerned.
Lord Winters looked grave.
The police do not always get it right.
Plus, Ewan might have issues that he has not shared with the family.
Things that I was only just learning about myself. That might explain it.
Issues?
Ivy was shocked.
It seemed that she had been looking into the wrong family member when it came to secrets. Her younger brother was the one keeping things from her.
What do you mean?
Lord Winters stared at his daughter,
wondering how she was going to take the news.
She had lived a sheltered life so far, unaware of the things that went on in the real world.
This could change that.
Let us get out of here first, and then I will let Ewan tell you himself once he is free. Ivy and Reyes worked together to help Lord Winters out of the hospital bed,
and took him towards the door.
On the way, Royce stopped to explain what they were doing to one of the medical staff who did not complain. If anything, taking him away seemed to be a positive thing because it freed up a bed for someone else. It had become obvious to Ivy that the hospitals were all very overcrowded. She shuddered as she recalled how she first felt when she entered this place and considered it a gateway to death rather than a place of healing.
Thank goodness it had not turned out that way.
Others would probably not be so lucky. Things had worked out well for her. She got to take her father out of here, healthy again. Ivy knew that if she had ever taken her life for granted before, she would not do it again. Chapter 13. It took many hours for Lord Winters to explain the situation to the police, and to make them understand that his son had not poisoned him but that it was a health problem which had caused him to collapse. Things were so disorganized at the station that it took a long time for things to change for the better. But with his determination and the help of Ivy, Jonathan, and Duke Merrick, Lord Winters finally managed to make it happen. Ivy's emotions churned over and over the entire time. She kept darting between nerves and excitement to finally have that security blanket of her father back in her life. She tried her hardest to keep steady to help her father's case, but it was not easy to keep herself contained. It had been the most overwhelming day of her life so far. Royce's feelings were also all over the place. He did not really have to be at the police station. He could have left the family to sort out their own issues. But he feared something else might happen to Lord Winters, and Ivy might have to deal with it alone. He watched Lord Winters all the time, checking up on him.
I shall go and let him free.
The police officer finally agreed once he sorted out the facts. And of course,
I would like to apologize for any errors in judgment.
We worked with what we had at the time. Under other circumstances, Lord Winters would have pushed this further, conferring with the police officer over the errors made. But he was exhausted,
and he wanted to get back home to rest up. When he left the hospital,
he felt utterly full of energy. But now that had been zapped from him, he just wanted to get back to normal.
That is fine, thank you very much,
he said simply instead.
It is very much appreciated.
Ivy, Jonathan, and Royce assisted Lord Winters towards the front door of the police station where they would wait for Ewan. As they stood there, Ivy's fear levels grew. The last time she had seen her brother, he was struggling.
But that was a while ago now.
He could have been in a terrible state now. Ivy imagined, in her mind's eye, her brother dirtier, thinner, looking more dreadful, and it left her shaking with fear. The image grew so powerfully in her mind that when her brother finally appeared, looking more like himself than the version she held in her mind, she almost did not recognize him. He took her by surprise, almost knocking her backward.
Ewan,
she gushed in shock, clapping her hands against her mouth.
Oh, my goodness.
It is you.
She ran forward and wrapped her arms around him,
clinging to him tightly. Having her brother back and knowing that her family was finally together again filled her with so many emotions. Everything finally felt whole again. She had everyone that was important to her back in her life. And that included the man who was nothing to her beforehand. The man who stood behind her father, silently supporting them all.
Duke Royce Merrick.
Now that they had achieved what they set out to do, she had no idea what would happen with them next. Would they go their separate ways? Was the damage done by stealing the journal be too much, and they could never get things back? Or would the sizzling chemistry between them win out? Maybe this would be the time that something real could happen between them. There was no way to know for now. "Let us get out of here," Lord Winters said calmly, with his last energy. "We have much to discuss at home." "Are you coming too?" Ivy gave Royce a hopeful look. "Or do you need to go home?" Royce was not sure what to do for the best. He did not want to leave Ivy's side while things were so up in the air. He felt like they had a lot to talk about. But he also did not want to impose on another private family moment. "Yes, you must come," Lord Winters interrupted with a smile. "This now involves you, too. Please, come with us. Since you have been so helpful to my daughter, I would like you to know everything, too. You and Jonathan. If you do not mind." As Royce nodded, Ivy could not help but smile. The idea of him leaving gave her a tight knot of panic in her chest. But as soon as she learned that he was going to stay, it loosened. They did not have the stressful situations surrounding them any longer, her family was free. And her feelings were stronger than ever. She certainly felt something like love for Royce. Ironically, now she wanted to marry him more than anything. They left the police station and Ivy remained close to Royce the entire time. She loved the sizzle that he gave her, and wanted to cling onto it forevermore. She had always seen marriage as a chore. Something that she did not want to get involved in because she thought that it would be horrible. Seeing Elizabeth scared to give birth and Mary married to someone she did not like put her off. But if Duke Merrick could be her husband, someone that she got along well with and that she had a very strong attraction to, then it would not be too bad. For a moment, Ivy imagined kissing this man and starting a family with him. She thought about what it might be like to live with him. And it was a picture that she liked. She would not even mind leaving the comfort of her family home to be with him. But not right away. She had only just got her family back. She did not want to leave them just yet. For the time being. She just wanted things to be normal for a little while. The four of them stepped into the Winters household with a heavy silence surrounding them. Ewan had been quiet ever since they left the prison. And Lord Winters appeared too tired to talk. Ivy was starting to think that nothing would get resolved tonight because everyone would want to go to bed. But then Lord Winters took them all into the living room to talk. As exhausted as he was, he wanted everything out in the open. "I do not wish for there to be any more secrets in this family," he told his children firmly as they all took their seats. "Because secrets have caused a lot of unnecessary stress and drama, which no one needed to deal with. If I had been honest about my issues with my heart, then you would not have suspected poisoning of me." "You have troubles with your heart?" Ewan looked shocked. This was something he did not know. "I have." Lord Winters nodded. "But I am not the only one with secrets, am I?" Ewan remained tight-lipped for the moment, unwilling to be honest. "Son, there is a reason that the police arrested you without waiting around to find out the truth. Is there not? And before you deny it, please know that I already know about it." "What do you know?" Ewan asked quietly, his head hanging low with shame. "I have been told some things about you." Lord Winters used his firmest tone. "And you know what I am like. I do not believe things that I am told, unless I see evidence of it myself. I even heard things about Duke Merrick. But I did not listen to any of them. Rumors are merely words that do not mean anything." Why did you not tell me that you did not believe it when I spoke to you at the party? Ivy felt stunned as she listened to her father speak.
I might have listened to you and not acted in such a rash manner. Lord Winters laughed.
You are very determined once you set your mind to something. I have learned over the years of raising you that there is not always much point in trying to change your mind. Ivy was not sure whether or not to feel chastened by that. She knew that she had a stubborn personality, but she did not realize that it was quite so obvious to everyone else. Then again, her father was smiling. So clearly this was not something about her that irritated him. Perhaps it was even something that he liked. So, Ewan. Before Ivy could say anything else, Lord Winters turned the conversation back to his son.
I did not listen to what I heard about you.
I did my own research. And what I learned has troubled me. If Ewan had not just spent so much time in prison for a crime that he did not commit, then maybe he would not have been more dishonest with his life. But his father was right. Keeping secrets had done the Winters family no good. It had simply led to a terrible misunderstanding that could easily have been avoided.
I have made bets,
he admitted quietly. Many bets, and sometimes with some bad people. I did not think that my behavior would be so troublesome, and that it would lead to so many issues. I always felt like I had it under control. At least until I was arrested. And the police believed that I had poisoned you, Father, to regain some of the money that I had lost. That was when I was forced to confess the truth to myself. Ivy could hardly believe what she was hearing. The news that her brother had kept this secret, a legal life, terrified her. Ewan had always been a quieter version of herself in her eyes. And Ivy would never do anything as risky as what her brother was talking about. However, the news came as much less of a shock to Royce. He had been suspecting this very reason from the moment they left the police station. To him, Ewan displayed all the symptoms of having an addiction. And since he spent a lot of time with people who shared similar issues, he could tell. This was not a person who had set out to hurt his family. It was someone who had made some bad choices in his life and simply needed help. The hopeless cloud that surrounded Ewan confirmed that. I work with people who have gambling problems, he said seriously to Ewan, hoping not to appear like he was interfering. I understand how badly it can affect people's lives. I can help you too if you would like me to. Ivy's heart thawed as she listened to this man that she had fallen for, offering to help her brother. She did not understand the full extent of what Ewan had done. That was something which would probably come out over time as all the members of the Winters family got used to having no secrets. But she felt much happier about it knowing that Royce had no intention of going anywhere. He was staying to help out. He might not have made a promise to stick around for her. But as he turned to give her a loaded glance, she felt like that was there, underneath it all. Knowing that Duke Royce Merrick was going to remain in her life, becoming increasingly important to her every single day, gave Ivy the strength to get through anything. Ivy. Her father's voice suddenly grabbed her attention. I would like to extend great thanks to you. You did not give up on me and your brother, and that means a lot. We are a strong family, and with you, we can get through anything. I am grateful to Duke Merrick and Jonathan as well. But especially to you. You saved us. Ivy soaked in the praise, loving how it felt. Now she could understand why Royce enjoyed helping people. It gave her wonderful satisfaction. Maybe that was something she would do one day, too. Chapter 14. In the months that followed, Duke Royce Merrick became a common fixture in the Winters household, as he helped the family repair their ruined reputation. He assisted Lord Winters in reminding the city that he was a strong man who ran his business in an astute manner. Royce helped Ewan repay his gambling debts and also to get involved in the family company. Before this, Ewan had been determined to create his own path in life. But he soon gave up that idea once he realized how successful he could be working with his father.
It was wonderful to see. Ivy felt proud of them all. She loved seeing her family coming together in a way that they had not really done before. They were never fractured. But secrets had created an unnecessary rift. She had a lot of reasons to be proud of herself as well. Ivy had started to achieve things that she did not even know she wanted to do. She had started building her own charity to help children who had been orphaned. When deciding to help others, Ivy knew that she needed to find something that she felt passionate about. And learning how many children there were in London City alone without anyone to help, she immediately knew that was what she wanted to do. Royce had helped her a lot. He was wonderful and had a lot of experience. Ivy was utterly grateful to him. She probably could have started her charity alone but was glad to have him. What time will Royce be arriving? Lord Winters asked Ivy, so familiar with him now that he now referred to him by his first name. It feels like he is much later than normal. Does it not? He is usually here by now. Ivy smiled serenely at her father, trying to hide her inner turmoil. Once Royce arrived, she found it easy to relax. But she always felt on edge when he was on the way. The nerves and excitement to lay her eyes upon his handsome face were almost too much. The closeness that she now felt to Royce, the fact that she had been given the chance to get to know him, made her grateful for everything that had happened. It was a terrible situation, it had been utterly horrible at the time. But a lot of good had come from it, including Royce. It hit Ivy every now and again that she almost rejected him, that she had an instant dislike for him. How different things could have been if her father had not collapsed. He could be courting some other lady now, planning a proposal and a subsequent marriage to someone else. While he and Ivy were not courting in the typical sense, it felt to her like there was a promise between them, that something would eventually happen. Or so she hoped. The last thing she wanted was to get her hopes up for nothing. I do not know, she replied blandly, hoping that there was not a shake in her voice. I am sure it will not be long. He has promised Ewan that he will meet with him today and he does not ever let him down. Lord Winters gave his daughter a curious look. He had been wondering for a while now about where her feelings stood when it came to Duke Merrick. But he did not want to push her. He knew that this man would be good to her daughter, that he would treat her well and give her the life that she deserved, which was the very reason that he tried to introduce them in the first place. But he did not want to push it and force her away from him. However, now he felt like he needed to ask, just to try and figure out where her head was at. How are things with you and Royce? How is your friendship developing? Ivy flicked her eyes towards the window so that she did not have to look at her father. But he did not miss the pink tinge in her cheeks. Oh, fine. He is a very nice man. A wonderful friend to us all. Yes. He is a very good man. Lord Winters smiled to himself as he teased his daughter about very first meeting with Royce. It is such a shame that you do not want to see him or spend any more time with him. Ivy giggled. Yes, I know. I was very wrong to judge him so quickly. I have learned from that mistake. You have learned a lot from Royce. Lord Winters nodded knowingly. It is wonderful to see. He was impressed with how much his daughter had grown up recently. She had changed from a child into a woman in a very short period of time. He no longer felt like he needed to be worried about her. Whatever Ivy did in her life now, he knew that she would be fine. Her stubbornness and fiery nature had transformed into a steely determination. His wife would have been proud of her daughter. She would have loved to see what Ivy had become. She was now a younger, even stronger, version of who she used to be. Do you think that you might revisit your opinion about Royce now? Lord Winters asked. In a marriage sense, I mean. I know this might be a lot for you to consider, but I would just like to know. I am not sure. Ivy's heart pounded in her chest. Marrying Royce was all that she wanted. But she did not want to tell her father that in case it did not work out. I have not thought much about it. For the moment, I am simply concentrating on myself and my charity. I am not worrying about marriage right now. Lord Winters could tell from the way that Ivy said that it was not the whole truth. What she had not said had told him more than what she had. He thought his daughter might be falling for this man. Which was wonderful. It would make Lord Winters very happy to know that his daughter would have such a remarkable husband. I see. Well, that is fine. Simply tell me again when you do decide to marry. And of course, I shall help you. Ivy did not answer her father, because her eyes had caught a glimpse of something out of the window that caught her eye. It was Royce's carriage. He was finally here, which was the best news ever. Oh look, Duke Merrick is here. We should go and greet him at the door. With Ivy effectively cutting off the conversation with her words, Lord Winters had no choice but to follow her towards the front door. Not that he minded, he had all the information that he needed to know. Lord Winters stepped back and allowed his daughter to greet the man that she was falling for. It was even more obvious from their interaction that there were feelings there. It appeared to be from both sides as well. Which made him even happier. If his daughter could marry for love, that would be wonderful. Lord Winters did not know much about his wife before he married her. Their union was arranged by their parents. They had simply been very lucky that love had come from that wedding. It was the very reason he had not wanted to bring a second bride into his life. Because he knew that he would never love anyone as much as he had the mother of his children. He wanted his daughter to find the same thing. Lord Winters, Royce said, insisting on using his full title even though he had been offered the choice of using his first name. He preferred to be as respectful to Ivy's father as possible. May I speak with you? Ivy was instantly taken aback. She had been looking forward to seeing Royce all day. And now he wanted to see her father first. Even though she knew that it was silly to feel that way, she felt put out. She had spent all morning with Charlotte picking out her finest lilac-colored dress, styling her hair, and applying a thin layer of makeup. She wanted him to really see her and notice her for her beauty. Yes, of course, Royce. Let us go to the drawing room where we can have some privacy. Ivy knew what was expected of her. She was supposed to wait for the men to come back into the living room after having their meeting, to find out the parts of it that they wanted her to know. But Ivy did not have the patience for that, and needed to know now. Even if it was business-related, they never usually hid that from her. They treated her as an equal, which was exactly where Ivy liked to be. Maybe she had not changed the world for all women, but she had become more respected in her own home. And that was something. With a sense of mischief in her heart, Ivy tiptoed behind the men, and she followed them from a distance to the drawing room. A part of her hoped that the discussion would be terribly dull. Then she could return to the living room and act like she had heard nothing. In that way, she would not have a reason to feel guilty. The door closed behind the men and she made her way there quietly. Fear and guilt did not set in until she pressed her ear up against the door. That was the moment she started to feel bad. Even more so, when she heard the words being spoke, first by her father, and then by Royce. You would like to marry my daughter? Yes, my lord. That is why I have purchased a ring for her. Of course, I cannot ask until I have your permission, which I am hoping you will give me now. Ivy almost leapt back as shock bolted through her. Royce wanted to marry her, too. He was planning to ask her to marry him soon. He simply needed her father's permission before he could. That was so wonderful. So overwhelmingly romantic. It made her happier than anything else ever could. She knew that she needed to get away quickly, so she would not be caught listening to their conversation. If Royce knew that she invaded his privacy again, he might change his mind about the whole thing. And that was the last thing that she wanted.
Ivy did not regret listening in though, because now she could prepare herself for the biggest moment of her entire life. If she had not been prepared for that conversation coming her way, it might have caused her to collapse, and they had suffered enough fainting to last them a lifetime. Ivy moved even faster, with her heart pounding heavily in her chest, and she positioned herself on the chair. She crossed her legs at the ankles and folded her hands in her lap. "Are you all right?" Ewan asked as he spotted her sitting stiffly in the seat as if she was waiting expectantly. He ran his eyes over her face curiously. "You look very strange, Ivy. Is something happening?" Ivy smiled at her brother and she indicated for him to take a seat. She wanted all of her family there for the big moment. They had been a large part of her romantic journey, and she wanted everyone to join her for the next part and the rest of her life. After all, they were the most important people to her. "Something is about to happen," she told Ewan mysteriously. "But you'll have to wait and see." "Oh no. Not more secrets?" Ewan chuckled. "Secrets have never done this family well." Epilogue. Ivy stared at her reflection, admiring the way that her wedding dress clung to her body, really giving her an amazing hourglass figure. The dressmakers had done a wonderful job of making her look like a princess from a fantasy land, which was exactly how she wanted to appear. Ivy wanted to spend the happiest day of her life feeling like one of the heroines from her favorite books. The lacy, tight-fitting bodice and the skirts that flowed out around her feet were helping her get that sensation, as was the veil covering her blushing cheeks. As soon as she grasped the flowers in her hands, she knew that she would be ready. "You look absolutely beautiful," her father commented from behind her. Ivy could hear the thick emotion in his throat which threatened to bring tears to her eyes, as well. "And the house looks wonderful also. It was a wonderful idea of yours to hold the ceremony in our home. It allows everyone to be here." As far as Ivy was concerned, there were many people that she wanted at her wedding. People who had helped her along with her love story. Mostly Jonathan and the extended family that came with him. Without him, the meetings with Royce in the early days when her father and brother were indisposed would have been impossible. There were other guests that Ivy wanted, too. People who she worked with. Many of the children that she helped with her financial assistance had been invited, and she really wanted them to be there. Ivy would not have felt right without inviting them along, and a church wedding might have prevented that. It was not considered seemly to have working-class people at events such as weddings, but that did not affect Ivy's decision. She preferred to work around things and to find a way to bend the rules to suit herself. She had even made favors of flowers and silver leaves for all the staff at the Winters house, as well as herself and the bridesmaids. Mary and Elizabeth, of course, so that everyone could be involved. It was not traditional, but Ivy hoped that it would be. She felt like a wedding should be a pleasant event for everyone to enjoy. Mary had been stunned to learn of the proposal. Even after she learned about the friendship that had built after all that had happened, she was not expecting it. But then, Mary found it challenging not to believe the rumors, even when she saw firsthand what a good man Royce was. Maybe she was not as smart as Ivy had always assumed. Not that she could blame her friend. She was the same before she learned more about life. "I am ready now," Ivy told her father with a determined nod. "Come on, let us go." They walked down the stairs. The same stairs that Ivy had descended all that time ago when it was her coming-out party. She had felt uncomfortable then. Unhappy in her clothing and generally in her own skin. She had not liked the idea of getting married then and she did not want men to assume she was ready. So she shut herself down. Now, she was a different person. One who was filled with confidence and happiness because she had grown up. And she knew exactly who she was. She felt happy with the woman that she had become. She saw roses at the end of the Isle of Blossoms that had been settled on the floor to assure the couple a happy path through life. He looked even more handsome than usual, in his tailored charcoal grey suit that fitted his body perfectly. Now when Ivy looked at him, she did not simply see a man with lovely dark hair, warm eyes, and striking features. She also saw the wonderful, golden heart that lay in his chest and made him the most perfect man in the world. She had gotten lucky, meeting a man that she loved so dearly, and she could not wait to spend the rest of her life as his wife. The fantasy that she had created in her mind when it came to her future was about to become the most wonderful reality that she could ever ask for. She could not wait. Ewan stood next to Royce, a proud supporter of their union and a very pleased groomsman, with a happy smile on his face. He had been given the responsibility of holding on to the plain gold rings with their initials and the date of their wedding upon it, until the moment that the couple needed them, which was a job that he took very seriously. Even though they were not having the most typical of weddings because Ivy did not care for the rules, there were certain traditions that he could not let go. This wedding was not just about appearances, but he wanted it to be right. "It really does look wonderful in here," Ivy commented to her father, not letting go of his arm for even a second. "I shall have to thank all the staff who worked on it afterward. Oh, and look at that pile of gifts. Goodness me, I did not think that we invited so many people to come. And we did not ask for anything." Again, Lord Winters found himself impressed. Ivy was not the most spoiled child. She did not act out in the way that he had seen other wealthy children did. But she had grown up in a world where everything was done for her. So she did not ever think about the staff before. It was nice for him to see her more aware of the people around her. It had made Ewan and himself more thoughtful. They had all become much better. The organist started playing the music, indicating that it was time for the wedding to begin. All the guests rose from their seats and turned to look at the bride. But Ivy had eyes for only one person. She could barely acknowledge anyone else in the room when the love of her life stood across from her, looking at her as if she was a vision of beauty. Ivy could not recall another time where she had seen Royce as close to tears at this moment. Ivy walked with grace and poise, meeting her bridesmaids at the end of the aisle and the priest who stood just above them. At that moment, her father let her arm go, and her future husband took hold of her hands. "I shall be able to kiss him soon," Ivy thought excitedly. Finally, after all this time, it will be allowed. She had been thinking of that moment for such a long time, planning it in her mind. The chemistry still sizzled brightly between them, so she did not think that it would be a letdown when it finally happened. At least, she hoped it would not. Already, her lips tingled with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on this beautiful spring morning. We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Duke Royce Merrick and Lady Ivy Winters." Excitement built in Ivy's chest as the ceremony progressed. She really wanted to listen to every single word spoken, to savor every single second of the most wonderful day of her life. But her brain had become fixated on the idea of her very first kiss with Royce, and she could not shake the thought. It reminded her of the day in her father's office and when they went to the library for research. Back when it felt like she might explode if she did not kiss him. Now, she was glad that they had waited. The moment would be even more special because they had done it in the right way. In the way that was expected of them. The ceremony rolled on, with the couple eventually reciting their vows to one another. There was a tremble in Ivy's voice as she said, "I do." But she did not feel embarrassed about it because Royce sounded exactly the same. The emotion that had built up between them ever since the moment that they had first met filled them both and burst free as they tried to speak. It was impossible for either of them to keep it inside. Eventually, the wedding came to an end, allowing Ivy and Royce a moment alone before the celebration began. While in the family hallway, just enjoying their first ever moment by herself, everything inside of Ivy tensed. Her shoulders practically hunched up around her shoulders as she waited for it to happen. Royce cocked his head and he slowly dipped his head down to hers, increasing the tension inside of her. It felt like he was moving incredibly slowly, too slowly. And the anticipation grew worse. Ivy rose slightly onto her tiptoes to meet Royce's kiss. She pursed out her lips and brought them up to his, her heart racing the nearer she got. Then their lips connected, and everything changed for Ivy. She felt as if the world had been turned upside down as many explosions fired off in her chest. The butterflies continued to flap, giving it everything they had. And Ivy's knees grew weak. She had never been kissed before, but she knew that it was a good one. She did not need to worry that their compatibility was only in her mind, because it definitely was not. "I love you," Royce told her as they pulled apart, saying those freeing words for the very first time. He had not even said them as he proposed, even though he felt it because he wanted to create so many wonderful memories of their wedding day. "I love you too," Ivy replied happily. "I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. I am so very happy that I met you." Maybe their meeting had been fractured and stressful, but it was clearly something that was supposed to happen because it had changed a lot of lives for the better. Now, all they had to do was look forward to their happy ever after together. The end.
If you like our channel, please subscribe and make sure to click on the bell icon, so that you won't miss any future audiobooks we'll upload for free each week on YouTube.